The siege began not with fire but with silence. At dawn the parish woke to walls of steel. Armored trucks ringed the block, their engines low and patient. Mercenaries moved like clock hands, shifting positions every hour. Floodlights stayed fixed on the stained glass, washing saints in a cold white glow. Inside we rationed what little we had. Bread crumbled faster than courage, water barrels ran thin. Families camped in pews, children drawing shapes in the dust, their crayons dull from overuse. Carla sat cross-legged by her battered laptop, wires spidered into batteries and scavenged radios. "They've cut us off," she said, voice flat. "No signals out. No feeds in. They're not storming, they're starving us." Naya leaned against the bell frame, her arms still strapped. "Then we don't starve. We hold." "Hold with what?" Carla snapped. "Faith? Hashtags. They're choking us out inch by inch. This isn't a raid, it's a siege." I sat at the altar, ledger open, Rook in my hand. Circle and notch. Circle and notch. The pages filled with names, but the blank lines loomed larger. How many more before this ended? Outside, chance had died. The city moved on or pretended to. Cole's narrative was simple. Jonah Mercer and his people had made themselves hostages. Stability required containment. And the council nodded, their pens already drafting ordinances to legalize the cage. And appeared that evening, her entrance quiet as dusk. She stood at the back, hands folded, eyes sharp. "He won't storm you," she said softly. "He'll wait until hunger does the work." "And you?" I asked. "Here to watch us thin out?" "No," she said. "Here to remind you, Cole fears martyrs. If you die loudly he loses. If you die quietly he wins." "Then we don't die," Naya muttered. Anne's gaze moved to her, unreadable. "Everyone dies. The question is whether you make it cost him." She slipped a folder onto the altar. Inside, sketches of sewer lines, old maps of utility tunnels. "A crack in the wall," she murmured. "But cracks can be bait as much as escape." Her eyes lingered on me. "Choose carefully, Jonah. Siege is not war, it's patience turned into punishment." That night the bell tolled once. Not loud, not triumphant. Just a hollow sound rolling across streets emptied by fear. Families stirred in their blankets. Children lifted their heads. The siege was real. And it was only beginning. The parish became a city inside a city. By day, sunlight bled through stained glass, painting saints across cracked stone. Children traced the colors on the floor, their laughter brittle but stubborn. By night, the floodlights outside erased the moon, bleaching the nave in relentless white. We organized shifts, water carriers, food cutters, watchers at every window. Carla's radio rig sputtered static but no voices. She cursed under her breath, soldering wires with shaking hands. "Even the emergency bands are jammed," she muttered. "It's like the city has gone deaf." Naya brought a crate of stale crackers into the nave. "Then we speak louder. Ring the bell every hour if we have to." "Noise isn't signal," Carla shot back. "Noise gets tuned out. Signal gets hunted." Their words cracked like dry wood. Everyone was fraying. That evening I walked the perimeter. Families huddled in pews, mothers whispering fairy tales into their children's ears, the words trembling like broken glass. Volunteers played cards on crates, faces lit by candles, pretending the world was still ordinary. I stopped by the bell. The rope hung limp, fibers frayed by too many pulls. I touched the bronze, cold under my fingers. Jonah Mercer, Rook in a cage. Cole made his first move 3 nights into the siege. A convoy rolled by, slow and deliberate, carrying loudspeakers. His voice filled the parish square, calm as always. "Jonah Mercer has trapped families inside a parish. He denies them food, denies them relief, denies them peace. If they walk out, they walk free. If they stay, they are his hostages." The sound rattled the windows, but what rattled deeper was the murmur it left behind. A mother in the back whispered, "Maybe he's right. Maybe if we leave." Naya cut her off, voice sharp. "Step outside and you disappear. You know what his freedom means." But the doubt hung in the air like smoke. That night, Carla cornered me near the altar. Her face was pale, eyes ringed with exhaustion. "We can't hold long," she whispered. "They're tired, hungry, scared. And Cole is speaking straight into their bones." I held the rook in my palm, its edges biting into my skin. "Then we remind them why we're here. Why we don't bend." She shook her head. "Jonah, they're not soldiers. They're families. You can't build a wall out of hunger." And slipped in again at dusk, her presence like a ghost brushing the air. She stood beside me at the cracked bell. "You feel it now," she murmured. "Not betrayal. Not raids. Something colder. Siege doesn't break bodies. It breaks faith." I didn't answer. "Cole won't strike first," she continued. "He's waiting for you to falter. One mother stepping out, one child carried away. Once that line breaks, the flood follows. Then he doesn't storm you. He swallows you." I turned to her. "Why are you here, Anne? To warn me? Or to measure when I break?" Her eyes glinted in the half-light. "To see if the Rook can still move when every square is surrounded." The ledger sat open on the altar. I stared at the blank page, knowing it wouldn't stay blank long. Names would come. They always did. But as the bell tolled at midnight, echoing hollow through the square, I realized something colder than hunger had entered the parish. Doubt. And doubt was heavier than chains. The fourth night was the loudest yet. Not outside, the mercenaries stayed still as stone, but inside the parish where fear finally found a voice. It started with a whisper near the back pews. A young mother, eyes hollow, clutching her little girl. "If we just walk out," she said, "they'll let us go." He promised. The words spread like fire in dry grass. Other families joined, some nodding, some biting their lips in silence. Hunger gnawed louder than conviction. Naya slammed her fist against the wall. "You think Cole will free you? You think he'll hand you bread and walk you home? Step outside and you're gone, names without graves." A father rose, face tight with anger. "At least gone is better than watching my son starve in here. Jonah talks about lines and rooks and ledgers, but none of that feeds my boy." The nave erupted. Shouts clashed like fists. Half swore to stay, half demanded release. The children cried, their voices higher than any chant. I stepped forward, rook in hand, ledger under my arm. The bell loomed above me, its cracked bronze silent for once. "Cole wants this," I said. My voice carried not with fire, but with the weight of exhaustion. "He doesn't need rifles if hunger does the work. He doesn't need bullets if fear makes you walk out for him." A man shouted back, "Better fear than death." I opened the ledger, flipping through its scarred pages. Names stared up, each circle and notch carved by blood. Jorge, Langford, Lewis, the workers from the convoy. Tito. They thought the same, I said. That surrender would mean safety. That compromise would mean survival. But look where they are. The crowd quieted, uneasy. I raised the Rook high, its wood gleaming under floodlights seeping through stained glass. You leave, you vanish. You stay, you suffer. That's the board Cole has set. But remember, he fears one thing more than hunger. He fears a city that refuses to kneel. Silence hung heavy. Then a child's voice pierced it. "Mommy, I don't want to go." It broke the argument. Parents pulled their children close. Tears cut through the hunger. Naya leaned on the bell frame, whispering, "You bought us another night." But I knew, it was only another night. Later, Carla found me in the sacristy, her laptop glowing faintly. "Jonah," she whispered, "I caught something." A signal, faint, slipping through the jammers. She tapped a key. Static filled the room, then a voice, garbled, distant, but real. "Perish, not alone, hold, cracks in the wall." Then silence. Her eyes burned with hope. "It means there are people out there. Friends. Maybe even inside Cole's lines. If I can boost the signal, we can talk to them." I touched the ledger's blank page. "Or it means Cole left a door open on purpose. A crack to lure us out." Carla swallowed. "Then what do we do?" I looked at the Rook. Straight lines. No curves. We test it. Carefully. But we don't gamble the families. That night and appeared again. She leaned against a pillar, her face carved half by shadow. "You kept them inside," she murmured. "But how many more nights before hunger tips the scale?" "As many as it takes," I said. She tilted her head. "And if it takes too long? What if your ledger fills with the names of children before Cole ever storms these doors?" Her words cut deeper than knives. "Then we find the crack," I whispered, and smiled faintly. "Just remember, Jonah, cracks can save you or bury you. Choose wisely which one you step through." At midnight the bell tolled again. Not triumphant. Not desperate. Just steady. The city outside didn't answer. But inside the parish the families stayed. For now. And in the silence between echoes I knew, the siege wasn't just around us. It was inside us. By the fifth dawn, the parish smelled of damp stone and stale hunger. Candles had burned low, wax pooling like frozen blood. The ledger sat open on the altar, blank page glaring at me, waiting for its next sacrifice. The whisper of escape had spread again. Carla's faint intercepted signal, the promise of cracks in the wall. For some, it was salvation. For others, a trap. For me, it was a decision I could no longer postpone. We gathered in the nave, families, volunteers, Naya leaning pale against the bell frame, Carla clutching her battered laptop. Even and lingered in the shadows, silent observer. I laid the Rook on the altar, wood worn smooth by too many nights of gripping. We've held this ground longer than anyone expected. We've defied Cole's floodlights, his hunger, his lies. But now we stand at a line we cannot ignore. There may be a crack in his wall. Murmurs rippled through the pews. Hope. Fear. Carla stepped forward, voice sharp with urgency. I picked up the signal again last night. Short, broken but real, not alone. Hold. Crack in the wall. It came from inside the city, not Cole's towers. Someone is trying to reach us. A father clutched his son tighter. And what if it's bait? What if he's luring us out to parade our corpses on his screens? Naya's voice cut through, rough but steady. Then we test it with our eyes open. Sitting here we starve. Walking out maybe we live. The room turned to me. I opened the ledger, letting the crowd see its pages, the names carved into its scarred paper. Every line here is a choice, I said. Some chose survival and Cole buried them anyway. Some chose defiance and the city remembered them. This book is not my burden alone, it's ours. Tonight I ask you, do we wait for hunger or do we test the crack? Silence. Then, slowly, a mother raised her hand. We test it. Another voice followed. Then another. But not all. A group near the back shook their heads, faces grim. One man spoke for them. We stay. Better to starve on holy ground than vanish in the dark. A fracture, clear and sharp. And stepped forward at last, her presence like a blade. You'll split yourselves in half, she said. Cole wins either way. He doesn't care if you starve or scatter, only that you fracture. That's the real siege, Jonah. Not walls. Doubt. I looked at her, searching for more. But her eyes gave nothing back. That night the decision came. We divided into two groups, those who would hold the parish and those who would test the crack. Carla begged to go with the latter, her laptop strapped to her chest, wires coiled like veins. Naya, still bandaged, insisted on leading the group that stayed, her good hand gripping the bell rope like a weapon. You'll need the ledger, she told me. No, I said. You'll need the bell. We clasped hands, silent oath. The escape group slipped out through the sacristy, moving by moonlight. Sewer grates pried open, tunnels stinking of rust and rot. Carla guided with her maps, her eyes shining fever bright. I carried the Rook in my pocket, every step a gamble. Behind us the parish bell tolled once. Hollow. Defiant. A sound that said we are still here. The tunnels stretched endless, water lapping at our boots. The air thick with mold. Carla whispered directions, her laptop flickering faintly. Then, movement. Shadows ahead. Figures waiting in the dark. The crowd froze. Heartbeats hammered like drums. A flashlight clicked on, cutting the dark. Voices whispered, Mercer? I stepped forward, Rook raised in my hand. Yes. The light steadied. A man in tattered Stability Force armor lowered his rifle. His visor was gone, his eyes raw and human. Behind him, more soldiers emerged, faces gaunt, uniforms stained, rifles slung low. Cracks in the wall, he said. We've seen enough. We don't serve him anymore. Relief surged through the group like breath after drowning. Carla's eyes brimmed with tears. But in my chest, the ledger's blank page burned hotter than ever. Because cracks in walls cut both ways. And I knew Cole would not leave them unpunished. We returned before dawn, mud on our boots, soldiers at our side. The parish erupted with hope, families rushing forward, voices rising. For the first time in days the air smelled of possibility. Naya limped from the bell, her face pale but her eyes blazing. You found them. Yes, I said. The ledger closed with a snap. The blank page waited, but not tonight. Tonight the Rook had moved. And the siege had changed. Cole struck back, not with bullets, but with silence. The morning after the deserters joined us, the city's airwaves went black. Television loops froze on emergency screens. Radios hummed with nothing but static. Phones displayed a single message, connectivity suspended for public safety. Carla slammed her laptop shut so hard the casing cracked. They've cut everything. No social feeds, no streams, no signals. He's sealing the city in a blackout. Families crowded around her in the nave, murmurs rising into panic. How will our relatives know we're alive? How will the world see? How will we know what's happening outside? Naya pulled the bell rope, its clang rolling through the parish. Then we speak louder than wires. The city still has ears. But even her voice carried the edge of fear. The defected soldiers, weary, hungry, confirmed our worst fears. He's deploying jammers on rooftops, their leader said, voice hoarse. Whole blocks blacked out. No broadcasts, no leaks. Anyone caught with a transmitter is detained. Detained means disappeared, Carla muttered. The soldier nodded grimly. He's learned. He saw how cameras broke his lines in the square. He won't let that happen again. That night, Cole's voice returned, but only his. His face filled every emergency channel, calm and paternal, the only sound in a city gone mute. Order must not be hijacked by noise. False signals spread fear. Rumors breed chaos. For the safety of all, communications will remain restricted until stability is restored. Trust only what you hear from me. His voice lingered in every apartment, every car, every silent kitchen. He had turned silence into his weapon, his voice the only echo allowed. Inside the parish, despair crept like mold. Without feeds, without outside witnesses, our defiance felt smaller, thinner, like a candle trying to burn in a vacuum. A mother whispered, maybe he's right. Maybe silence is safer. The ledger lay open on the altar, its blank page glaring at me. I gripped the rook until my knuckles whitened. Silence isn't safety, I said. It's burial before death. But my words felt small against the quiet. Carla refused to surrender. She raided the defectors' packs, tearing apart their radios, pulling wires like veins. If they jam signals above, she muttered, we'll go below. Old copper lines, maintenance channels, things no one remembers. The city is older than coal. Her fingers blistered, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. But slowly the hum of static bent, broke, and a new sound bled through, faint Morse beeps, stuttering but real. She gasped. They can't block everything. The city's veins still leak. Hope flickered. And appeared again, her shadow stretching across candlelight. She leaned against the pew, voice smooth. Clever. But leaks cut both ways. Every whisper you send out might lead him in. Carla's jaw tightened. So we stop whispering? That's what he wants. Anne's eyes slid to me. Jonah, she's brilliant. But brilliance has weight. Every spark she throws could light the city, or burn it. I met Carla's gaze. She didn't flinch. Let me burn him, she said. That night, Carla's signal reached further. We caught fragments, distant voices, hurried, urgent. Saw the footage, still alive, parish holding. Families marching by candlelight. Cracks in more than one wall. The city was whispering back. Faint, scattered but real. Carla grinned through tears. He can cut the wires, but he can't cut faith. Cole answered the next morning. Armored trucks paraded through downtown, hauling giant screens. His face filled them all, calm and relentless. The so-called resistance spreads lies and shadows. Anyone aiding them, anyone caught transmitting, will be treated as collaborators. Silence is safety. Obedience is survival. On the screen behind him, images flickered, raids on basements, people dragged out for hidden radios. Proof of his new tactic, silence enforced with terror. Families in the parish saw it, and the murmur began again, we're trapped. We're next. The rook weighed heavy in my pocket. Straight lines. No curves. Cole had stolen the city's voice. But he had not yet stolen ours. At dusk, I climbed the bell tower. The city spread below, a patchwork of floodlights and shadows. I rang the bell. Once, twice, 3 times. Its clang rolled across the darkened streets, louder than silence, heavier than Cole's calm. Inside, families lifted their heads. Children smiled through hunger. The city heard, not through wires but through iron and air. And for the first time since the blackout, silence cracked. Carla didn't sleep. She sat cross-legged on the stone floor, soldering iron in one hand, her laptop guts spilled open in front of her. Wires coiled around her like snakes, glowing faintly with jury-rigged power from car batteries we dragged in weeks earlier. Naya limped over, sling tight around her shoulder. You're going to fry yourself. Carla didn't look up. Better fried than silent. By the 6th night of blackout, despair was dripping through the parish like a leak no cloth could soak up. Children cried for voices on radios that stayed mute. Volunteers argued whether Carla's efforts were hope or self-delusion. Some muttered Cole's line, silence is safety. The rook pressed against my leg in my pocket. Safety. The word tasted rotten. Then it happened. Carla shouted suddenly, her voice cracking with exhilaration. I got it. A channel, an open frequency, wide enough to carry more than whispers. Static screeched from her jury-rigged speaker. Then voices real, clear, human. This is Free Square Radio. If you hear us, you are not alone. The parish bell tolls still. The city stands still. The nave erupted in gasps, some in disbelief, some in tears. A mother clutched her daughter tight, whispering, They know. They know we're here. Carla grinned, hair wild, eyes shining. We're back in the air. We answered that night. Carla patched the bell's toll into the broadcast. Its deep clang carried through every hidden speaker, every scavenged radio, every ear desperate for proof. And I spoke, voice raw but steady. This is Jonah Mercer. We are not hostages. We are not silent. Coal can choke wires, but he cannot choke truth. If you hear this, you are part of the line. Straight. Unbroken. No curves. It wasn't poetry. It didn't need to be. The fact of my voice was enough. The next morning, Cole retaliated. Screens mounted on armored trucks filled with his face. Come. Paternal. Always calm. Do not be deceived. Criminal elements hijack abandoned bands, spreading fear. These voices do not represent the city. They represent only hunger for chaos. Then the images changed. Shaky footage of looters breaking windows, fires spreading. His voice laid blame squarely, Mercer's people. Families in the parish stared at the screens, fear clawing back into their eyes. Naya spat on the ground. Those aren't ours. He staged them. Carla's fists clenched. It's war now. Broadcast against broadcast. Signal against silence. And arrived at dusk, her steps deliberate. She stood over Carla's tangle of wires, watching sparks dance. You've drawn his gaze, she murmured. Carla wiped sweat from her brow. Good. Let him watch me. And turn to me. He'll come for her first. He fears her more than your bell. Bells fade. Signals multiply. I felt the rook in my hand, edges sharp as truth. Then we shield her. At all costs. En's eyes narrowed. Cost is his favorite currency. Be sure you're willing to pay it. That night, Carla pushed harder. She hijacked Cole's own feed for 30 seconds. His face flickered, replaced by ours. The cracked bell, families huddled but defiant, deserters in stolen armor lowering their rifles. The city saw us, unedited. For 30 seconds, silence was shattered. The retaliation was swift. Floodlights flared through parish windows. Drones buzzed low, their lenses gleaming red. A voice boomed from outside. Mercer. Hand over the transmitter and the woman operating it. Do this and the parish will not suffer. Gasps spread through the nave. All eyes turned to Carla. She stood frozen, pale, but her jaw tightened. They want me, she whispered. Naya stepped in front of her, sling creaking as she raised her good arm. Then they'll have to come through me. I slammed the ledger shut, my voice cutting the air. No one leaves. No one surrenders. If they want her, they face us all. The bell tolled, my hand pulling the rope with fury. Its clang drowned out the loudspeakers rolling through the streets. Inside, Carla kept typing, hands trembling but relentless. They can jam us tomorrow but not tonight. Tonight the city hears us. Tonight they know we're not ghosts. Her broadcast spilled into the blackout. This is Carla from the parish. We are alive. We are fighting. If you can hear me, ring what bells you have. Make the city loud. Across the static, faintly, bells answered. Not just ours. Church bells. Alarm bells. Even pots and pans banged in distant kitchens. The city roared against silence. And for the first time in the siege, Cole's calm voice faltered. By dawn, the parish was exhausted but alight. Families clutched each other, whispering that the city had answered, that they were not alone. But I knew what came next. Cole had asked once. He wouldn't ask again. He would take. And the blank page in the ledger waited, patient. The morning after Carla's broadcast, the city didn't wake to silence. It woke to the sound of boots. Columns of mercenaries moved block by block, kicking in doors, dragging families into the streets. Not raids for food or weapons. Raids for radios. For wires. For anything that could speak. Kessler smuggled us a report through one of the defectors. They're calling it a communication sweep. His voice was dry, tired. Cole's people are arresting anyone with a signal booster, even old ham sets. They want the city mute again. Naya cursed under her breath. This isn't a sweep. It's a purge. Cole's face filled the giant screens again, broadcast from the armored trucks. He was smiling, almost fatherly. Unauthorized transmitters spread lies and endanger our safety. Collaborators will be detained for questioning. To protect our city, silence must be restored. Behind him, footage played of agents dragging screaming families into vans. Cole didn't look at the images. His voice stayed calm. Noise is chaos. Silence is peace. The crowd in the parish groaned, some sobbing openly. For many, Cole's calm was more terrifying than any bullet. Carla worked without pause, dark circles under her eyes, fingers blistered. "He's hunting us," she muttered, soldering wires with trembling hands. "But if I can mirror the signal wide enough, he can't kill it all. He can't cut the whole city at once." Naya crouched beside her. "Carla, if they trace you, then they come for me," Carla snapped. "Better me than all of us." In silence, I stepped in, placing the Rook on the table beside her laptop. Its wood glowed faintly in the candlelight. "No. If they want your voice, they'll have to drown us all." That night the sweeps came closer. Floodlights swept across parish windows, drones humming low. Loudspeakers barked. "Mercer, give us the operator. Give us the transmitter. And this now." Families huddled in pews, whispers like tremors. One father rose, voice shaking. "If giving her up saves our children, why not? Why should my son starve for her wires?" The nave erupted, shouts, arguments, sobs. Half wanted to shield Carla, half wanted to surrender her. The siege was not just outside anymore, it was tearing the parish in two. Carla stood, her laptop pressed to her chest like armor. "If handing me over keeps you alive, then maybe I should." "No," my voice cut through harder than I intended. "This isn't about you, Carla. It's about all of us. If we hand you over, we tell Cole he can take any of us whenever he wants." And leaning in the shadows, spoke for the first time. "You're right. But remember, martyrs only matter if people see them fall. If he takes her quietly, it will be silence again." The room froze. At midnight, Carla lit the parish with her defiance. She patched into the Free Square channel again, her voice shaking but strong. "This is Carla. They want me gone. They want silence. But if you hear this, you know I'm still here. And if I disappear tomorrow, remember, it was not because I was guilty. It was because I was loud." The signal cut after 30 seconds, jammers screaming back. The city had heard enough. The retaliation came before dawn. Floodlights flared. Drones shrieked. The loudspeakers barked again, colder than ever. "Final warning. Hand over the operator. Or we come inside." Families clutched each other, faces pale in the glow. Carla sat cross-legged, her laptop in her lap, tears streaking her soot-stained face. "Jonah," she whispered. "Maybe Anne's right. Maybe if they see me fall, if I make it public, they'll know the cost of silence." I looked at the ledger. Blank page waiting. The Rook heavy in my palm. Straight lines. No curves. "They'll have to write your name in this book over my dead body," I said. The bell tolled once, shattering the silence. And the siege groaned tighter. The parish walls shook before dawn. Not with bombs, not with fire, but with the slow grinding of armored trucks forming a complete circle. Engines idled like a growl that wouldn't stop. Families clutched each other in the nave. Children whimpered. Volunteers tightened their grips on nothing more than sticks, pipes, and fury. Cole's voice boomed through the loudspeakers outside. "Jonah Mercer, this is your last chance. Surrender the operator. Surrender the transmitter. If you refuse, the parish will be entered and order will be restored." Silence followed, heavy as the floodlights pouring through stained glass. Carla looked at me. Her face was pale, lips trembling, but her eyes were hard. "Jonah, maybe this is it. If I walk out, at least the families live." "No," my answer came sharp. She tried again. "You can't risk all of them for me." I gripped the Rook so hard it cut my palm. "I'm not risking them for you. I'm risking them for the voice you carry. If we give you up, Cole doesn't stop. He learns. Next time it's Naya. Next time it's the children. Silence doesn't save us, it eats us." Naya dragged herself upright, her arm still bound in its sling. "If he wants to come in, then let him come. We'll show the city what restored order looks like." Some of the families gasped. One man shouted, "Are you mad? They'll kill us all." Anne's voice cut through, cold and steady. She stepped from the shadows, arms folded. "They won't kill all of you. Not here. Not now. Cole doesn't want a massacre on camera. He wants a scalpel, not a hammer." She looked at Carla. "He wants you." Carla swallowed. "So, what do we do?" Anne's eyes slid to me. "You already know. Turn the scalpel into a mirror. Force him to cut in daylight. We moved quickly. Carla wired her laptop to the bell frame, every clang syncing with a live broadcast. If Cole stormed us, the city would see. The deserters donned their battered Stability Force armor, lining the doors like guardians turned inside out. Naya limped to the altar, her sling dangling but her eyes unflinching. I stood at the center, Rook in one hand, ledger in the other. "Let him come," I whispered. The doors shuddered. Hinges screamed. Boots thundered. Then the crash. Mercenaries in black armor poured through, shields raised, visors down. Gas hissed. Floodlights blinded. But Carla's cameras caught everything. The feed streamed before Cole's jammers could choke it. Families screaming, children pressed to the floor, deserters raising shields of their own. The bell tolled, its sound ripping through the chaos, shaking the rafters. "Straight lines," I shouted. My voice cracked but carried. "No curves." The crowd roared back. "Straight lines." Mercenaries pushed forward. Batons swung. But then hesitation. Their visors reflected not chaos but cameras. They knew the city was watching. One dropped his baton. Another froze. The deserters shouted from our side, "You don't have to obey. You don't have to starve them." The clash faltered. Not broken but cracked. Then the loudspeakers thundered again, Cole's voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "Hold the line. Secure the operator." Two mercenaries surged through, grabbing Carla's rig. She screamed, clutching it to her chest. The feed flickered, static, light, shadow. I lunged, Rook in hand, slamming it into one mercenary's visor. Glass cracked. He stumbled back, gasping. Carla kept typing even as a baton struck her shoulder. Blood ran, but her voice filled the broadcast. "This is Carla. If I vanish tonight, remember, it's because I was loud." The feed cut, screens across the city going black. The mercenaries froze, waiting for orders. Floodlights flickered. The commander barked something, but half his men stood still, visors lifted. Cole's voice returned, brittle with fury, "Fall back. Now." And just like that, they withdrew, leaving the parish in smoke, rubble, and silence. Inside, chaos turned to stunned quiet. Families stared at Carla, bleeding but alive. Naya clutched the bell rope, knuckles white. Carla smiled weakly, her laptop clutched to her chest like a newborn. "He didn't get me," she whispered. "No," I said. "But he knows he has to kill louder next time." And slipped back into the shadows, her voice trailing like smoke. "And louder deaths make louder martyrs. He fears that. Remember it." That night the bell tolled once more. Not for victory. Not for defeat. But for survival. The city had seen. And Cole's silence had cracked. The siege did not just starve stomachs. It starved rules. By the second week, the city's order rotted into barter. Families dragged broken radios, scraps of bread, even shoes worn thin into alleyways that hummed with whispered trades. A new phrase spread like ash across the streets, "ash markets." Naya explained it with a grimace. When fire burns everything, only ash is left. People trade ash because it's all they have. One of the deserters slipped us news of the first ash market sprouting near the docks. "Crates from the relief depots get lost," he said. "Sold for favors. Bread priced higher than gold. And guess whose men guard the corners? Cole's, of course. He didn't just tolerate the markets, he built them. Food rationed through whispers, not lines. Hunger turned into a business, a leash. I insisted on seeing it myself. We crept out through the tunnels, faces smeared with soot, led by deserters who knew the patrols. Carla stayed behind, arm in a sling now, still tinkering with her laptop as if wires could protect her. The docks reeked of salt and smoke. Between stacked containers, fires burned in barrels, lighting faces drawn tight with desperation. A loaf of bread passed from one hand to another, exchanged for a watch. A can of beans went for a wedding ring. And above it all, Cole's mercenaries watched, helmets gleaming, rifles slung. Not stopping it. Taxing it. Naya spat on the ground. "He starves the city, then sells it back piece by piece." A woman approached us, her cheeks hollow, baby clutched to her chest. "Please," she whispered. "They want my house keys for milk. Just milk." I wanted to hand her my ledger, as if names could fill her child's belly. Instead I pulled out the Rook. Its wooden edges cut into my palm. "We're not here to trade," I said softly. "We're here to remember who made this hunger." She didn't understand. She only wept. And found us among the ash. She moved like she belonged there, eyes scanning the trades, lips set thin. "See how Empire adapts?" she murmured. "Cole doesn't silence hunger. He repackages it." He turns desperation into loyalty. Families who feed through his markets will defend him more fiercely than soldiers. I clenched my jaw. And how do we fight hunger with ledgers? Her gaze cut into me. By proving it doesn't have to be this way. But every loaf you hand out, every sack of rice, you must show where it truly comes from. Not from coal. From the line you refuse to bend. Naya muttered, we barely have crumbs ourselves. Anne's voice sharpened. Then find crumbs. Or lose the city. That night, back in the parish, Carla confronted me. I can't code bread, Jonah. I can't solder rice. We need supply, not signals. I sat at the altar, the ledger open, blank page burning. If we can't outfeed him, then we out-expose him. Show the city what the ash markets really are. His markets. His starvation dressed as generosity. Carla hesitated, then nodded slowly. Then give me proof. Names, routes, transactions. If I can show who profits from this hunger, maybe I can break his leash. The deserters whispered of a convoy, one of Cole's shipments meant for the ash markets, crates relabeled and siphoned. We planned to intercept it. Naya, still wounded but relentless, slammed her good fist against the table. We don't just steal it. We broadcast it. Bread to the people, proof to the cameras. I looked at the Rook, the line it promised. Straight. But straight lines cut deepest when the board is tilted. At dawn we set out. The streets were gray with smoke, alleys littered with ash. Families watched us from doorways, their eyes dull with hunger, their whispers following like ghosts. Carla's voice crackled in my earpiece. Convoys moving. 4 trucks. Escorts heavy. If we hit fast. The ledger was tucked into my coat. The Rook in my pocket. Cole had starved the city into silence. We were about to feed it noise. The convoy rumbled down Riverfront Avenue just before dawn, for trucks wrapped in gray canvas. Each bore the painted emblem of relief shipments, a sunburst insignia meant to soothe the eye. But our deserters had traced the manifest. Inside wasn't aid for shelters. It was bread siphoned to the ash markets, crates sold like currency in alleys. We hid in the ruins of an old warehouse, windows smashed, rebar jutting like bones. Naya crouched beside me, sling tight around her shoulder but rifle steady in her good arm. Her eyes burned, feverish with hunger and defiance. Carla's voice crackled in my earpiece from the parish. Convoy approaching. Escorts are 8 mercs, 2 jeeps, heavy weapons. Cameras live on my end. You'll have 20 seconds once they hit the blind corner. I gripped the Rook in my pocket, its edges digging into my palm. Straight lines. No curves. The lead jeep rolled past first. Deserted streets echoed its tires. I signaled with 2 fingers. The deserters in stolen armor kicked debris into the road, pipes, bricks, rusted sheet metal. The convoy slowed, engines growling low. Naya rose, shouting, "Relief is not profit." Her voice cracked but carried, echoing against brick. From the shadows, families emerged, dock workers, mothers, even children clutching signs scrawled on cardboard. They weren't armed, not really. They were loud. The mercenaries barked orders, rifles raised. But cameras on Carla's drones circled overhead, streaming every second. I stepped out from cover, ledger in hand, Rook raised high. "This food is stolen from your city," I shouted. "Bread sold for rings and roofs. Proof is here in these crates." The commander sneered, visor gleaming. "Step aside, Mercer. These shipments are authorized." Carla's voice filled my ear, urgent. "Jonah, stall them. I'm mirroring their radio feed now." Naya banged her clipboard against the side of the lead truck. "Open it. Let the city see what you're hiding." The crowd roared, chanting, "Open it! Open it!" The commander hesitated. Visors reflected children's faces, drones overhead. The hesitation cracked wider when one deserter, dressed in stolen armor, shouted from our side, "I drove these trucks last week. I know what's inside. Not aid, ash market stock." Gasps rippled. The commander barked an order. 2 mercs moved to shove the crowd back. But before they could strike, I slammed the Rook against the truck's canvas cover. The sound rang hollow, unmistakable, like wood stacked tight. "Crates," I said. "Not aid. Crates to be sold while your families starve." Cameras zoomed in as volunteers ripped the canvas open. Wooden boxes tumbled out, splitting on the asphalt. Bread spilled across the street, loaves bouncing into dust. The crowd surged, not to hoard but to lift the loaves high, proof before hunger. "Relief is not profit," they screamed. The commander froze. His orders choked under the roar. Then the first baton swung. A mercenary shoved a dock worker to the ground. A mother shrieked. Panic rippled. But instead of scattering, the crowd pressed forward, raising bread like shields. The deserters raised their rifles, not firing but blocking blows, standing between mercs and families. Carla's feed streamed it all. Not chaos. Not looting. Proof. I pushed into the heart of it, ledger open, Rook raised. Write this down. I shouted at the cameras. Cole starves you, then sells your hunger back in crates. This is his order. This is his silence. The crowd roared, louder than trucks, louder than batons. Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit. Then, gunfire. A mercenary panicked, firing into the air. The shot cracked the sky. For a heartbeat, silence froze the street. Then the crowd surged again. But this time the mercenaries faltered. Their commander shouted, but half his men lowered rifles, eyes wide, visors fogged with doubt. One ripped off his helmet and dropped his weapon. Another followed. The convoy broke, not with blood but with defection. By the time engines roared away, 2 jeeps retreating, the trucks were ours. Families swarmed, not hoarding but sharing, hands passing loaves, children clutching apples like treasure. Naya leaned against the truck, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead but smiling through it. Bread for proof, she rasped. Carla's voice in my ear was thick with tears. The feed is everywhere. The whole city saw it. They saw bread falling from Cole's crates. They saw his men crack. I dropped to my knees, ledger open on the asphalt, Rook pressed against its pages. Then let the board write this night, I whispered. But even as the crowd cheered, even as loaves were broken and shared, I felt the ledger's blank page burn against my hand. Because Cole would not starve quietly. He would burn back. Carla worked 3 nights straight without sleep. Her laptop casing was cracked, her hands raw from solder burns, but she refused to stop. Every hour she replayed the feeds. Families lifting bread with smiles, children clutching apples, deserters shielding mothers, then the sudden hiss of gas and Cole's men charging from the shadows. She spliced them together, cutting his narrative apart. By the 4th dawn she leaned back, trembling, and whispered, "It's ready." We broadcast that morning. The city woke to screens hijacked with shaky footage. Crates bursting open, loaves passed hand to hand, laughter rising in alleys. Then, mercenaries unloading gas canisters, masks already in place, striking before chaos had even begun. Carla's voice narrated, low but steady. They call this chaos. They call this Mercer's noise. But look, bread in hands, not riots. Crates in alleys, not depots. Proof that hunger is staged. Proof that silence is sold. The footage ended on the cracked parish bell, tolling against smoke. For the first time in weeks, the city had 2 stories playing at once. Reactions split like fault lines. In the north, families banged pots on balconies, chanting relief, not profit. In the south, ash markets swelled anyway, people lining up beneath Cole's mercenaries for bread stamped with his sunburst. The council chambers filled with shouting, half demanding investigation, half praising Cole for keeping stability amid unrest. And in the streets, neighbors glared at each other as though hunger itself had chosen sides. Naya limped through the parish, watching families tend to their wounds. "We showed them truth," she muttered. "And still half the city thanks him." Carla rubbed her eyes, exhausted. "Truth doesn't fill a stomach. Not yet." Her words hung like ash. That night I walked through the tunnels alone. The ledger was heavy in my coat, Rook in my palm. Voices drifted from above. Whispers of loyalty, curses of betrayal. In one block people prayed for me. In another they cursed my name. I sat on the damp stone and opened the ledger. The blank page glared, demanding. "Proof is not enough," I whispered to the dark. "They need more than truth. They need to eat." And appeared in the half-light as if the tunnels themselves shaped her shadow. "You've split the city," she said. "That's both victory and danger. Cole thrives on unity, obedience. You thrive on fracture. But fractures cut both ways." I didn't look up. If half hate me, half hope in me, does it matter? The ledger keeps filling. And crouched beside me, her eyes like knives. It matters because the half who hope will fight harder than the half who obey. And Cole knows this. He will burn bread itself before he lets hope survive. Her hand brushed the ledger. "Be ready to choose whose names you write next. Because the ash markets are no longer just stalls. They're battlegrounds." Back in the parish, Carla pushed another fragment onto the air. An image of deserters standing between mercenaries and families, rifles lowered in refusal. She whispered, "Let them see it wasn't just us. Even his men are cracking." The feed spread fast, faster than before. Some mercenaries removed their visors mid-patrol, shame heavy in their faces. Others tightened grips on rifles, muttering Cole's mantra, "Noise is chaos. Silence is safety." The city was no longer one body. It was two, pulling in opposite directions. That night the bell tolled once. Families in the parish lifted their heads. Across the city, other bells answered, churches, schools, even pipes struck with hammers. The sound rolled through the blackout like thunder. And in the ash markets something shifted. People lined up for bread, but when they heard the bells, some turned away, choosing hunger over humiliation. Not many, but enough to matter. Cole struck back at dawn. His face filled the emergency screens, calm but colder now. Jonah Mercer spreads lies. He manipulates images. He exploits hunger. This ends soon. Stability will not be silenced. Behind him, footage rolled of the warehouse aftermath, people coughing, children crying. His version polished, ruthless. But now it competed with ours. The city saw both. And the city had to choose. The parish filled with whispers of fear and faith. Carla slumped against the wall, her laptop finally dead, smoke curling from its circuits. Naya gripped the bell rope, her eyes hollow but unyielding. Families prayed, deserters cleaned rifles, children slept with crumbs in their hands. I sat at the altar, Rook in one palm, ledger in the other. The blank page waited, patient as hunger. The ash markets had started as stalls and alleys. Now they were more than that. They were a mirror showing the city its fracture. And the next move, bread or blood, would decide which half survived. Carla worked 3 nights straight without sleep. Her laptop casing was cracked, her hands raw from solder burns, but she refused to stop. Every hour she replayed the feeds. Families lifting bread with smiles, children clutching apples, deserters shielding mothers, then the sudden hiss of gas and Cole's men charging from the shadows. She spliced them together, cutting his narrative apart. By the 4th dawn she leaned back, trembling, and whispered, "It's ready." We broadcast that morning. The city woke to screens hijacked with shaky footage. Crates bursting open, loaves passed hand to hand, laughter rising in alleys. Then, mercenaries unloading gas canisters, masks already in place, striking before chaos had even begun. Carla's voice narrated, low but steady. "They call this chaos. They call this Mercer's noise. But look, bread in hands, not riots. Crates in alleys, not depots. Proof that hunger is staged. Proof that silence is sold." The footage ended on the cracked parish bell, tolling against smoke. For the first time in weeks, the city had 2 stories playing at once. Reactions split like fault lines. In the north, families banged pots on balconies, chanting relief, not profit. In the south, ash markets swelled anyway, people lining up beneath Cole's mercenaries for bread stamped with his sunburst. The council chambers filled with shouting, half demanding investigation, half praising Cole for keeping stability amid unrest. And in the streets, neighbors glared at each other as though hunger itself had chosen sides. Naya limped through the parish, watching families tend to their wounds. "We showed them truth," she muttered. "And still half the city thanks him." Carla rubbed her eyes, exhausted. "Truth doesn't fill a stomach. Not yet." Her words hung like ash. That night I walked through the tunnels alone. The ledger was heavy in my coat, Rook in my palm. Voices drifted from above. Whispers of loyalty, curses of betrayal. In one block people prayed for me. In another they cursed my name. I sat on the damp stone and opened the ledger. The blank page glared, demanding. "Proof is not enough," I whispered to the dark. "They need more than truth. They need to eat." And appeared in the half-light as if the tunnels themselves shaped her shadow. "You've split the city," she said. "That's both victory and danger. Cole thrives on unity, obedience. You thrive on fracture. But fractures cut both ways." I didn't look up. If half hate me, half hope in me, does it matter? The ledger keeps filling. And crouched beside me, her eyes like knives. It matters because the half who hope will fight harder than the half who obey. And Cole knows this. He will burn bread itself before he lets hope survive. Her hand brushed the ledger. "Be ready to choose whose names you write next. Because the ash markets are no longer just stalls. They're battlegrounds." Back in the parish, Carla pushed another fragment onto the air. An image of deserters standing between mercenaries and families, rifles lowered in refusal. She whispered, "Let them see it wasn't just us. Even his men are cracking." The feed spread fast, faster than before. Some mercenaries removed their visors mid-patrol, shame heavy in their faces. Others tightened grips on rifles, muttering Cole's mantra, "Noise is chaos. Silence is safety." The city was no longer one body. It was two pulling in opposite directions. That night the bell tolled once. Families in the parish lifted their heads. Across the city, other bells answered, churches, schools, even pipes struck with hammers. The sound rolled through the blackout like thunder. And in the ash markets something shifted. People lined up for bread, but when they heard the bells, some turned away, choosing hunger over humiliation. Not many, but enough to matter. Cole struck back at dawn. His face filled the emergency screens, calm but colder now. Jonah Mercer spreads lies. He manipulates images. He exploits hunger. This ends soon. Stability will not be silenced. Behind him, footage rolled of the warehouse aftermath, people coughing, children crying. His version polished, ruthless. But now it competed with ours. The city saw both. And the city had to choose. The parish filled with whispers of fear and faith. Carla slumped against the wall, her laptop finally dead, smoke curling from its circuits. Naya gripped the bell rope, her eyes hollow but unyielding. Families prayed, deserters cleaned rifles, children slept with crumbs in their hands. I sat at the altar, Rook in one palm, ledger in the other. The blank page waited, patient as hunger. The ash markets had started as stalls and alleys. Now they were more than that. They were a mirror showing the city its fracture. And the next move, bread or blood, would decide which half survived. And had always been smoke, present, shaping the air but never solid enough to grasp. She arrived when she wanted, disappeared when it suited her, and never once let the parish decide whether she belonged. But the ash markets had changed that. After Carla's broadcast tore the city in half, after bells rang from rooftops and alleys, and no longer slipped through unnoticed, people began to point, to whisper, who is she? Whose side is she on? And Cole predictably chose that moment to strike. The council called a hearing. Not a trial, not yet, but a spectacle. On screens across the city, they announced, inclined to testify on stability, truth, and the role of insurgent voices. Jonah Mercer's name was not spoken, but it bled through every syllable. Inside the parish, the deserters whispered nervously. If she bends to Cole, you're finished. If she bends to you, she burns herself. Naya snorted. She should have chosen weeks ago. Carla, pale from exhaustion, murmured, and plays both sides because both need her. That makes her dangerous, but it also makes her necessary. I said nothing. My hand rested on the rook, heavy in my pocket. Straight lines, no curves. But Anne was nothing but curves, and I knew she was walking toward a square where the board itself could crack. The day of her testimony, the city held its breath. She entered the council chamber in a plain gray coat, no emblem, no insignia. Her hair was tied back, her expression a mask of composure. Cameras clicked. Families crowded around screens in ash markets and apartments, waiting to see which way she would tilt the scales. Cole sat across from her, calm as ever, fingers steepled. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence was enough. Miss Klein, he said smoothly, you have been close to Mr. Mercer. You have heard his rhetoric, seen his actions. Tell this council, does he bring order or chaos? The question slid like a blade across the chamber. Back in the parish, we huddled around Carla's battered projector, the feed sputtering across the stone wall. Families pressed close, every breath caught in their throats. Anne's pause felt like a lifetime. Her eyes flicked, once, to the camera. For a moment, I wondered if she was looking at me. Then she spoke. Calm. Deliberate. Chaos, she said. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Even Cole's composure cracked for half a second into satisfaction. But Anne raised a hand, silencing the stir. Chaos, she repeated. But chaos is not noise, it is truth. And truth, by its nature, shatters silence. Mr. Mercer brings chaos because silence has reigned too long. The council erupted. Cole leaned forward, his voice sharper now. So you admit he undermines stability? Anne's eyes did not waver. I admit he exposes what stability means under your hand. Bread sold for rings. Gas pumped into warehouses. Families forced to choose between hunger and loyalty. The feed cut briefly, static, a flicker. Carla swore, hammering the projector. Then the picture returned, Anne's voice rising. Stability without dignity is not peace. It is prison. And if that is what order means, then I say chaos is the only honest choice. The chamber erupted again, half in outrage, half in cheers. In the parish, the room shook with gasps and cries. Families clutched each other, murmuring her words like prayer. Naya slammed her fist on the bench. Finally. She chose. But I knew the cost. Cole's smile, thin and sharp, was not defeat. It was promise. that night and came to the parish. Not slipping, not hiding. Walking through the doors as if she had always belonged. The crowd parted. Some glared, some reached out as though she were saint and traitor at once. She found me by the altar, where the ledger lay open, Rook resting on its spine. "You made your choice," I said. Her expression did not change. "No." I told the truth. "Choice comes later." I studied her, the woman who had been both shadow and mirror. "Why risk it? You could have bent, saved yourself, walked free." She met my gaze without flinching. "Because Cole doesn't fear you. He fears me. I was his voice once. I know where the seams are. And now the city knows I see them too." Naya stepped forward, suspicion sharp in her eyes. "And what does that make you now? Ally? Double? Spy?" And looked past her at the families huddled under stained glass. "It makes me visible. Which means Cole has to kill me loud, or not at all." Her words echoed like the bell. Later, when the parish slept, I opened the ledger. The blank page stared back. My hand hovered, pen trembling. I wanted to write her name, not as a death but as something else. A risk. A gamble. A piece that had finally chosen its square. The rook pressed against my palm, heavy, unyielding. Straight lines. Button was not a rook. She was a queen. And queens change boards. Cole did not wait long to respond. By morning, every screen in the city carried her face. Cole did not wait long to respond. Incline who had stood before the council, every screen in the city carried her face, framed in accusation. Not the composed Incline who had stood before the council, traitor to stability, stills, framed enemy in sympathizer. Words agent of chaos, traitor to stability, spliced her testimony into fragments. Agent of chaos. The Mercer brings chaos, her testimony into fragments, stripped of their second half. The part where she had turned it into truth was gone. Played on repeat, Cole's voice accompanied the montage. The part where she had turned it into truth was gone. Cole's voice accompanied the montage. Now she stands with the man who threatens to tear it apart. She once saw her choose chaos. Now she stands with the man who threatens to tear it apart. The message was clear. You saw her choose and had chosen, and Cole would make her betray her city. Inside the parish, the message was clear. Families crowded around and had chosen, and Cole would make her pay. Mothers muttered in confusion. Inside the parish, families crowded around Carla's patched feet. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve. Mothers muttered in confusion. Is she bad now? Fathers in anger. And stood in the corner. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve and asked, still buttoned. Is she bad now? The family's eyes cut toward her. And stood in the corner, some suspicious, her gray coat still buttoned. Naya spat at the screen. The family's eyes cut toward her. He's carving you into a scapegoat. Some frightened. Anne's voice was quiet. Naya spat at the screen. He's reminding the city what happens when someone crosses him. Anne's voice was Carla whirled on her. He's reminding the city what happens when someone crosses him. Testimony broadcasted Carla whirled side by side. Then fight back. Show the city the truth. Let me splice the full testimony broadcasted side by side. Every word I speak becomes a weapon for him. Shook her head. Proof is nothing against hunger. Every word I speak becomes a weapon in my palm. Proof is nothing against hunger. Her gaze locked on mine. I leaned forward, the rook cold in my palm. He already made me a symbol. The only question is whether I survive it. Visibility. That night, the siege made me a symbol. A fire broke out is whether I survive it. 3 apartments gutted. The siege grew teeth. Cole's broadcast. A fire broke out in the North Quarter. Riots with 3 apartments gutted. But the deserters whispered a different truth. Insurgents flames were lit by his own men. And the deserters whispered a different truth. Sprayed across the flames were lit by his own men. And feeds Mercer's fire. And amid the smoke, she had not lit the blaze across a blackened wall with it. And in the parish, tension coiled. She had not lit the blaze, but her name burned further from Anne. In the parish, tension coiled. Some families moved their bedrolls insisting she was the only one bold enough to tell truth in Cole's chamber. Others clung to her, the split insisting she was the only one bold enough to tell truth in Cole's chamber. The split approached me late, her voice ready to trust, she's a liability. Their backs. Cole will kill her, approached me late, make us voice sharp. If we keep her, we paint a target on all of us. Cole will kill her, and over her, make us stepping into the candlelight. If we keep her, we paint a target on all of us. He already painted the target. And over it's her, not where I stepping stand, into the candlelight. It's what I represent. He already painted the target. And what's that? It's not where I stand. Anne's answer was simple. It's what I represent. Proof that even his own can turn. And what's the next morning? Anne's answer was simple. Outside the parish. Proof that even his own not can the chaotic spray of riots. The next morning, measured shots cracked outside the parish. We rushed to the windows. Not the chaotic spray of riots. A man lay sprawled in the square, measured shots, blood pooling beneath him. We rushed to the windows. A flyer with Anne's face on it. In the square, pinned to his chest with a knife. In his hand, scrawled in red flyer with Anne's face one by one, pinned to his chest with a knife recoiled. A note scrawled in red their children. One by others one. Looked at Anne as if she had carried the bullet in herself. Some clutched Cole their children. Cole had made his move clear. Others looked at Anne as if she had carried the bullet in herself. Until the city begged us to cut her loose. Cole had made his move clear. Carla pounded her fist on the altar. Through her until the city begged us to cut her loose. We have to flood the city with her full fist on the altar. Her words, not his edits. We have to flood the city with her full testimony. And then he airs footage of this man dead in the street, flyer in his hand. Anne's face was stone. He'll splice my words to his corpse. And then he airs footage of this man dead in the street, flyer in his hand. Truth and lie. Until no one remembers which is which. She turned to me, her voice low. Truth and lie. Jonah, until no one remembers which becomes his weapon. She turned to me, her voice low. Do you keep me in the open? Every move I make now becomes his weapon. The Rook weighed in my pocket like judgment. Do you keep me in the open, or do you cut me out? But this was no straight line. The Rook weighed in my pocket like judgment. This was a curve Cole had bent around straight lines. That night, but this was no straight line. And stood beneath it, her curve Cole had bent around me. Eyes raised toward the cracked bronze. Told once. If he wants me visible, her hands clasped. Eyes raised toward the visible bronze. With you. If he wants me visible, she said softly. Not bending. Then let me be visible. The sound rolled across the city, carrying her silhouette with it. Not in alleys, in ash markets, the sound rolled across the families carrying her silhouette with it. People heard the toll and whispered her name. In kitchens where families scraped crumbs together, people heard the toll and whispered her name. But in choosing, she had become the board itself. Some with every piece forced to play around her. But in choosing, she had become the board itself. The blank page stared up as if waiting for me to write her name in advance. I opened the ledger, but I couldn't. The blank page stared up as if waiting for me to write her name in advance, leaving no mark. But I couldn't. Only an imprint. A shadow of a move not yet against the page, leaving no mark. Was not dead. Only an imprint. She was alive. A shadow of a move not yet made. And Cole had promised to make her louder still. She was alive, loud, and burning. And Cole had promised to make her louder still. The parish had grown used to fear. Hunger, floodlights, boots outside, but the night Cole aimed directly at Anne, the air itself felt sharper. It began with the deserters. One burst into the nave, armor dented, visor cracked. We caught a runner, he panted. Came through the sewers. Not a courier, an assassin. Marked orders, bounty in his pack. Name on the page was hers. The room erupted. Families cried out, some rushing to pull their children closer, others glaring at her as if she had summoned the blade herself. Nia cursed, shoving a pew aside. Cole's not subtle anymore. He's sending knives into our bedrolls. Carla's hands shook over her dead laptop. And if we stop this one, he'll send another. And another. And stood still, unflinching in her gray coat. Her voice was quiet but steady. Then let him. Visibility only matters if the city sees the cost. If he wants me dead, he has to do it in daylight. But daylight had never stopped Cole before. We questioned the runner. He was young, barely 20, eyes bloodshot from fear or drugs. The deserters dragged him into the sacristy, slammed him against the wall. A crude dagger clattered from his belt. Orders, one deserter growled, shoving a folded paper into my hands. I opened it. Stamped with Cole's seal, neat lines and cold ink. Klein. Dead or delivered. Proof required. The ledger felt heavier under my arm. Names already filled its pages, and this one waited to be written. The runner stammered through broken teeth. I didn't want to. They said my family, my sister, they said she'd vanish unless I did it. Please. The deserters snarled, ready to finish him. But I raised the Rook. Stop. He's not the knife. He's the hand holding it. And that hand is Cole's. And stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the boy. Go back, she said softly. Tell him you failed. Tell him the Rook still stands. The deserters balked. He'll just return. And shook her head. No. He'll return carrying the fear I put in him. And Cole hates fear he doesn't own. We let the runner go. The families were split. Some whispered that Anne was inviting more knives. Others said her mercy made her stronger. That night, as the parish slept, I sat beside the bell with the ledger open. My pen hovered above the blank line. Anne's name lingered there, unmarked but waiting. She found me there, of course. She always did. Why haven't you written it yet? She asked. I didn't look up. Because you're not dead. She crouched, her eyes glinting in the candlelight. Ledger isn't just for the dead, Jonah. It's for the betrayed. And you haven't decided whether to believe me yet. Her words cut deeper than the dagger ever could. 2 nights later, the attempt came again. This time, not a boy in the tunnels. This time, bullets. Floodlights flared through stained glass. Drones screamed overhead. Then, cracks like thunder. Windows shattered. Stones splintered. Families screamed, diving under pews. Nia bellowed orders, pulling children toward the basement. The deserters raised their rifles, firing back into the blinding light. Anne in the center, framed by the glow, and stood by the altar, her coat billowing like a banner. She didn't flinch as bullets chipped stone around her. This is what he fears, she shouted, her voice carrying over the chaos. Not death. Not silence. Visibility. Every shot he fires makes me louder. Carla, crouched by her broken rig, shouted through the din, "We need this on feed. Jonah, get her in the frame." I grabbed the Rook, raising it high, the bell's rope in my other hand. The clang rolled out, louder than gunfire, shaking dust from the rafters. Drones swiveled, capturing the sound. Ann's voice rang with it, "If he kills me, remember it was because I spoke." The gunfire stopped as abruptly as it began. Engines roared. Floodlights died. Silence rushed back in like water after a wave. Smoke lingered. Children sobbed. Families clung to each other, eyes darting to Anne. She was untouched. Not a scratch. Some whispered it was luck. Others said it was proof. But I knew better. Cole wasn't finished. This was rehearsal. Later, in the quiet, Anne sat across from me at the altar. Her eyes were tired now, the fire dimmed but not gone. "You see it, don't you?" she murmured. I nodded. "He'll try again. Louder. Bigger. Enough to make you a corpse and me a ghost." She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then don't let him. If he kills me, don't let it be quiet. Make him choke on my name." The Rook pressed against my palm, heavy, unyielding. Straight lines. But this line pointed only one way. Toward blood. Cole never wasted bullets without purpose. When his men opened fire on the parish, it wasn't to kill it was to measure how the city would react when she almost died. The answer had been written in fear and whispers. Now he would stage the real performance. The announcement came 2 days later, projected from every armored truck and rooftop screen. Anne's face filled the city, pale under floodlights, her counsel testimony replayed again and again. "This woman," Cole intoned, "chooses chaos. Tomorrow she will stand trial, not hidden, not in secret, but in the open square. All citizens may witness stability's judgment." It wasn't a trial. It was bait. Naya slammed her fist against the pew. "He'll execute her on live feed." Carla's voice shook. "And if we do nothing, the city watches her die and learns that Cole owns even chaos." And stood in the doorway of the nave, arms folded, gray coat draped like armor. "Then let him try. If my blood stains his square, the city will see whose hands are red." Her words lit fire in some, terror in others. Families clutched their children, muttering that they could not survive more martyrs. But the deserters leaned forward, jaws set. That night, I sat alone by the cracked bell, ledger open, Rook heavy in my palm. The blank page stared up at me as if already thirsty for her name. And found me there, of course. She moved like shadow but spoke like steel. "Don't write it yet," she said softly. "I may not have a choice." "You always have a choice. That's what terrifies him. Chaos is not noise, it's choice. Don't let him strip you of it." I met her gaze. "And what about you? You'll stand in his square, unarmed, waiting for his bullet." Her lips curved into something between a smile and a wound. "Visibility, Jonah. If he kills me, he proves me right. If he spares me, he proves himself weak. Either way, he loses." The morning of the trial, the square seethed with bodies. Families pressed shoulder to shoulder, held back by barricades. Mercenaries lined the perimeter, rifles gleaming. Armored trucks circled, screens mounted high. On the stage, a single chair. Empty. Waiting. The bell tolled from the parish. Once, twice. Its sound rolled down avenues, louder than the crowd's murmurs. And walked into the square without shackles, without escort. She had insisted on that much. Her gray coat flared in the wind, her face calm, her eyes sharp. The city held its breath. Cole emerged next, immaculate in his tailored suit, every step rehearsed. He stood tall beside the chair, voice calm as silk. "Citizens, you have lived through noise. You have suffered chaos. Today we restore stability." He gestured to Anne. "This woman betrayed order. She aided Mercer. She spread lies. And for that, she must answer." Gasps rippled. Cameras zoomed. Anne's voice rang clear. "Yes. I spread truth. I showed you what stability means. Bread sold in alleys, gas in warehouses, bullets in pews. If that is order, then I choose chaos." The square erupted, half cheering, half hissing. Cole raised a hand and silence fell. His soldiers stepped forward, rifles aimed. From the rooftop above, Carla's drones whirred alive. The feed streamed across hijacked screens, showing not just Cole's stage but the people, the barricades, the rifles aimed at an unarmed woman. I whispered into the mic, "The city sees you, Cole." Cole's jaw tightened. His voice, still calm, cut like glass. "Then let them see what happens to chaos." He nodded. One rifle clicked. The square froze. But before the shot came, the bell tolled again, deeper, louder, echoing across every street. Crowds surged against barricades, shouting, "Relief, not profit! Relief, not profit!" Children cried, mothers screamed, deserters in the crowd raised fists. The rifleman hesitated. Cole's eyes blazed. Fire. But the soldier lowered his weapon. Another followed. Cracks spread through the line. And suddenly, Cole stood alone on his stage, the cameras capturing not order but defiance. And raised her voice, carrying over the roar, "You see it. He cannot silence us. He cannot starve us. He cannot bury us in silence." The crowd thundered. Bells tolled from distant rooftops. Pots clanged. Drones streamed every moment. Cole's face contorted, but he forced his voice calm. "Enough. Retreat." The order was clear. His men pulled back. Trucks rolled away. The stage remained. Empty but for Anne standing tall. Back in the parish, the air trembled with what we had witnessed. Families wept. Deserters clasped each other's shoulders. And sat by the altar, her coat still dusted from the square. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "You didn't write it," she said softly. I closed the ledger. "Not today." The Rook pressed into my palm, steady, unbroken. The city had seen her stand against the empire and live. And Cole, for the first time, had been forced to retreat in daylight. That night the bell tolled again. Not for survival. Not for chaos. But for choice. The square still trembled from Anne's defiance when new boots found our door. Not the rhythm of mercenaries outside, but something stranger, hesitant, uneven, echoing through the tunnels beneath the parish. The deserters raised rifles, tense. Naya leaned against the bell frame, jaw clenched. If Cole's men are tunneling in, this is it. But when the figures emerged from the sewer grate, their visors were off. Helmets tucked under arms, weapons slung low, faces gaunt with fatigue. "Don't shoot," one said, voice cracked. "We're done fighting for him." There were 7 of them. Stability Force soldiers, not deserters stolen from convoys. Full squad gear, heavy packs, unit patches still on their sleeves. Carla hissed from behind her dead laptop. Or spies. They laid their rifles on the floor, barrels forward. One stepped ahead, older than the rest, lines carved deep into his face. "My name's Harker. 20 years in Stability Force. We've carried out raids, purges, silences. I won't carry them anymore." He met my eyes directly. "Mercer, we've seen your feats. We heard the bells. We want to stand with you." The Rook burned in my palm. Straight lines. But this move curved in every direction at once. Naya snarled. "You expect us to believe you? After gas, after bullets, after children choking in pews? You come in uniforms and think we clap for you?" One younger soldier flinched, eyes down. Another muttered, "We've lost families too." Anne's voice cut through, calm and cold. "If Cole sent them, he sent them for one reason, to slit us open from inside. To raid within." The parish fell silent. Families shifted uneasily, staring at the soldiers. Children whispered behind their mothers' skirts. I opened the ledger on the altar, its blank page waiting. "Names?" I said. Harker frowned. "What?" I tapped the page. "You want to stand with us? Write your names. All of them. Not numbers, not ranks. Names. If you betray us, they go into this book, same as Tito's. If you stand with us, you carry the book as much as I do." He hesitated, then took the pen. Slowly, each soldier scrawled their name. Some hands shook. One wrote with trembling block letters, as if afraid the page itself might burn. When it was done, I closed the ledger. "Now you're bound. Not by me, by the line you just crossed." The parish buzzed with whispers. Some volunteers muttered hope, more rifles, more bodies to defend the bell. Others muttered fear, wolves in sheep's armor. Carla cornered me by the altar. "Jonah, if Cole planted them, they'll rip us apart the second we let down our guard. This is how infiltration works." And leaned in. "And if they're real, you just tied your movement to ghosts and stolen uniforms. Either way, the city will see them and wonder, how many more cracks in the wall?" The Rook pressed into my palm, heavier than ever. "Then we find out fast." We gave them beds near the sacristy, watched by deserters. Families avoided them, eyes wide, muttering prayers. That night I sat awake, listening to their breathing in the dark. One soldier wept softly. Another muttered in his sleep, orders, screams, gunfire. They weren't spies. Not all of them. But not all of them were free either. The test came sooner than I expected. At dawn, floodlights flared outside, brighter than before. A loudspeaker boomed. "Mercer, we know you harbor defectors. Hand them over. Stability will be merciful." Families shivered. Deserters tightened their grips on rifles. And the 7 new soldiers froze. One began to rise as if to surrender himself. Harker grabbed his arm, hissing, "Sit down. That's an order." The boy's eyes darted to the door, then to me. "Fear. Guilt. Choice." Carla whispered, "This is it, Jonah. They break now or never." The bell rope swayed in Naya's hand. "Say the word." I stood, ledger under my arm, Rook raised high. "You wrote your names," I said to the soldiers. "The line doesn't bend. If you walk out, you walk into Cole's mouth. If you stay, you fight beside us. Choose." The parish waited. The boy trembled, tears streaming, then lowered himself back onto the bench. Harker nodded once, jaw tight. The bell tolled, deep and steady, rolling over the loudspeakers outside. And the square answered, voices rising, "Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit." Cole had tried to raid us from within. But the line had held. For now. Trust is heavier than hunger. And in the parish it weighed like lead. The 7 soldiers had chosen to stay. Their names inked into the ledger, their rifles stacked against the sacristy wall. But no matter how tightly they tied their boots, how softly they spoke, they carried the stink of Cole's uniform. Families avoided them. Mothers pulled children closer when they passed. Volunteers muttered behind their backs. Even the deserters who'd once been Cole's men watched them like hawks, as if betrayal could spread like rot. Harker tried to ease the tension. He spent the day hauling water barrels, carrying crates, kneeling beside families to share rations. His men followed, awkward, out of place. At dusk, he approached me by the altar, where the Rook sat on the ledger like a sentinel. "You don't trust us," he said simply. I didn't answer. He sighed. "I wouldn't either. But we're here. And if you want us to fight, give us something worth bleeding for. Orders, Mercer. Make us yours." The Rook pressed against my palm. Straight lines. No curves. "Not yet," I told him. That night, the soldiers lay on their bedrolls near the sacristy. Carla stayed awake across from them, her dead laptop in her lap like a shield. Naya kept the bell rope wrapped around her hand, eyes never leaving their corner. And as always stood in shadow. "They want redemption," she murmured. "Or at least they want to believe they do." I glanced at her. "You don't buy it." Her smile was thin. "Redemption is just another ration. They'll take it if you offer it. But loyalty? That's bought with hunger, same as bread." At dawn we tested them. A convoy was scheduled near the rail yard, another shipment bound for Ash Markets. Carla patched into the deserters' comms, whispering routes, rotations. "We can hit it," she said. "But we need bodies. More rifles." The parish looked to the 7. Harker stepped forward, his voice steady. "Let us prove it. Put us on the line." Naya growled. "Or let them lead us into a slaughter." The nave buzzed with arguments, half demanding proof, half spitting suspicion. Families clutched their children, whispering prayers against betrayal. Finally I raised the ledger. "You wrote your names. Now prove them. You'll walk point on the raid. If you break, your ink becomes blood." That night, under cover of smoke from the markets, we moved. The deserters led the rear, Naya limping but fierce at my side. Carla's voice crackled in our ears, guiding with stolen comms. The 7 took point. Every step felt like walking across glass. We reached the rail yard. The convoy idled in the shadows, guards scattered, smokestacks coughing. Harker signaled his men, crisp and sharp. 2 flanked left, 2 right, 3 crouched in cover. No hesitation. No betrayal. On Carla's count we moved. Crates split, food spilling onto cracked asphalt. Families hidden in the dark surged forward, grabbing bread, apples, tins. Cheers rose, muffled by hunger. But then searchlights flared. Sirens wailed. Cole's voice boomed from speakers mounted high. "Traitors within. Wolves in Mercer's fold. Look how he welcomes my broken dogs." Screens flickered on surrounding towers, broadcasting the raid. Not food, not proof. Only the soldiers in Cole's uniforms, rifles raised. The city saw them, not the bread. Panic rippled. Families faltered. Some shouted, "Spies! Spies!" Others clutched food tighter, desperate. Harker spun toward me, fury etched on his face. "We didn't know. We didn't." Naya fired into the air, silencing the crowd. "Focus," she bellowed. The Rook pressed into my palm, sweat slick on its edges. Cole had twisted even this, our proof, our raid, into his story. We dragged crates back through the tunnels, the parish erupting in chaos. Families screamed, some demanding the soldiers be cast out, others begging not to waste the food. Anne's voice sliced through the din, Cole doesn't need to kill them. He only needs to make you doubt them. And he's already won that much. Carla, pale and furious, shoved the footage onto the altar. He cut the feed. All anyone saw was uniforms in our ranks. Nothing else. He turned our proof into poison, again. The 7 stood in silence, rifles at their feet, shame burning their faces. I opened the ledger, blank page waiting. My pen hovered. The parish watched, breathless, waiting to see if their names would bleed across the paper. But I closed it instead. Not yet, I said. You fight again tomorrow. And tomorrow the city will see the truth. That night the bell tolled once, hollow and low. The city heard it, but the city also saw Cole's broadcast, Mercer harboring wolves. The fracture widened. And in the ledger the blank page grew heavier, as if already filled with names not yet written. The parish had always been loud, children crying, volunteers shouting, the bell tolling against silence. But the night after the convoy the noise turned inward. It began as muttering in the pews. They'll bring Cole's wrath down on us. Then it grew sharper. They wear his uniforms. They'll slit our throats while we sleep. Finally it broke into shouting. Families surged toward the sacristy, where the 7 soldiers lay restless on their bedrolls. Mothers screamed for them to leave. Fathers shoved forward, fists raised. One hurled a bottle that shattered against the wall. The deserters pushed back, rifles up. Stand down. Harker barked, his voice raw. But the crowd pressed harder, voices cracking under hunger and fear. Out. Out. Naya planted herself between them, one arm still in a sling, the other clutching a broken chair leg. Back off, she roared. We turn on each other now, we do Cole's work for him. Her words slowed no one. I climbed onto the altar, ledger open, Rook in my hand. The clang of the bell above rang once as I pulled the rope, shaking the nave with sound. Enough. My voice cracked but carried. This book holds every betrayal. You want their names in it? Fine. But know this, if they go, Cole wins twice. He poisons us once by planting doubt. He poisons us again when we devour our own. The knave trembled in silence. And stepped forward then, her coat gray against the candlelight. Cole doesn't need to storm these walls. He only needs you to tear each other apart. And you are one breath away from handing him that victory. Her eyes cut the crowd, sharp as blades. So breathe differently. Slowly the crowd's fury cooled. Mothers pulled children back. Fathers dropped their fists. But their eyes never left the 7 soldiers. Distrust clung like ash. Carla collapsed against her laptop, whispering, "This won't hold. Next spark they'll burn." Later in the sacristy Harker cornered me. His face was carved from stone, his hands trembling. "You saw it," he rasped. "They'll never accept us. Write our names if you must, but don't leave us in limbo. Either bind us fully to your cause, or cut us loose." I stared at the Rook in my palm. "And if I cut you loose, where will you go?" He gave a bitter smile. "Back into the dark. Back to him maybe. Isn't that what they already believe?" And appeared at my side after he left. "You can't keep them in shadows forever," she murmured. "Every ledger has a line where names either live or die." I closed the book with a snap. "Not tonight." She tilted her head. "You're not postponing. You're gambling. And you know what happens when gamblers lose." By dawn the soldiers made their choice for me. They gathered at the altar, armor scuffed, helmets tucked under arms. Harker spoke for them. "Let us fight. Not in shadows. Not in tunnels. In daylight in front of the city. If we bleed, let them see our blood. If we fall, let them know we stood with you." The parish buzzed, fear and hope colliding in the air. I set the Rook on the altar beside the ledger. "Then you fight," I said. "But understand, if you falter, your names bleed into these pages forever." Harker nodded. "Better ink than silence." That night, Carla whispered over her patchy comms, "Convoy near the river. Light escort. He wants bait again." Naya grinned, tired but fierce. "Then let the wolves walk first. Let the city see where their teeth sink." The 7 saluted, not to me, not to the parish, but to the cracked bell tolling above. And for the first time I wondered if Cole had miscalculated. Because if these men bled under our banner in daylight, they would stop being his wolves. They would become ours. The parish smelled of oil and smoke when we set out. The 7 soldiers marched in front, armor scarred, visors lifted so the city could see their faces. Behind them came deserters, volunteers, even families who refused to sit idle any longer. Carla's drone buzzed above us, its patched wings rattling like bones. "Stream is live," she whispered through the calm. Cole's eyes are watching too. Make him choke on what he sees. The Rook weighed heavy in my pocket. The ledger pressed against my chest. Tonight would decide if those 7 names stayed ink or turned blood. The convoy waited near the riverfront for trucks idling, mercenaries lounging like hunters certain of their prey. The air stank of bait. Harker glanced back at me. His eyes were steel. We go loud. I nodded. Loud and straight. The soldiers moved first. They didn't hesitate. Boots pounded pavement, rifles raised not at us but at Cole's men. The crack of gunfire split the night. Carla's feet streamed every shot. The city saw Stability Force uniforms firing on their own. No shadows. No doubts. The mercenaries scrambled, shouting into radios. One dropped his rifle and ran. Another lifted his visor, confusion in his eyes as he saw comrades turn. The deserters surged after Harker's squad, voices raw. Relief, not profit. Families on rooftops banged pots, bells tolled, the sound rolling across the river like thunder. But Cole had prepared for spectacle. Floodlights snapped on, blinding. Drones screamed overhead, their speakers blasting his calm voice. Look how Mercer corrupts. Wolves wearing our armor. Traitors dressed as saviors. Then the trucks opened, not crates of bread this time but riot gas. Canisters clattered to the ground, hissing white clouds. The crowd choked, stumbled, but Harker's men did not break. They pressed forward through the smoke, firing, pulling families out of the gas. One soldier tore his own mask off to strap it over a coughing child. Carla's camera caught it all. Her voice crackled, frantic but fierce. The city sees you. Hold, damn it, hold. The battle was chaos. Rifles cracked, glass shattered, shouts turned into screams. But amid the fury, the 7 stood unyielding. One fell, bullet in the chest. He dropped to his knees, blood pouring, but shoved his rifle to a volunteer before collapsing. Another dragged a wounded deserter to cover, even as a baton smashed across his jaw. Harker himself climbed onto a truck, ripping the sunburst tarp from a crate. Inside, bread, apples, rice. Proof again, undeniable. He raised a loaf high, shouting, "This is what they hide." The crowd roared, and the feed caught every second. By the time mercenaries retreated, 2 trucks burning behind them, the square was a storm of smoke and voices. Families clutched food, deserters carried the wounded, bells tolled louder than sirens. Of the 7 soldiers, 3 lay dead. 4 stood bleeding but alive. The city had seen their blood spill under our banner. Wolves no longer. Back in the parish, the bodies were laid before the altar. Families lit candles, whispering prayers. Naya gripped the bell rope, eyes wet but fierce. They earned it. Whatever they were, they're ours now. Carla's voice shook. The feed went wide. People are calling them the Straight 7. And leaned in the shadows, her tone unreadable. Names make myths, and myths make movements. I opened the ledger, Rook in my palm. Slowly, I wrote each fallen name in black ink. Not as betrayal. Not as debt. But as proof. Circle. Notch. Circle. Notch. The book felt lighter after. For the first time, names did not sting like failure. They burned like fuel. At dawn, the bell tolled again. Its sound rolled over the city, carrying the memory of 7 men who had walked in wearing uniforms of silence, and left carried out as voices. And for the first time in the siege, the parish felt less like a cage. Felt like a line. Straight. Unbroken. And still moving. The Straight 7 were buried in silence. No hymns, no speeches, only the cracked bell tolling 7 times, each note dragging across the city like a scar. Families wept openly. Volunteers bowed their heads. Even deserters clenched fists, jaws tight with grief. But grief has a way of turning into something heavier. It curdled into resolve. The parish children, thin from weeks of hunger, began it. They lined up before the altar, small hands clutching scraps of cardboard with crude drawings, bread, bells, straight lines. They stood there all morning, refusing to move. When I asked why, a boy of maybe 9, eyes too old for his face, answered, "If Cole's men shoot soldiers, then we'll stand where soldiers can't. If they silence voices, then we'll be voices too." Naya wiped her face with her good arm. Out of the mouths of babes. Word spread fast. Mothers, then fathers, then neighbors. Soon dozens of children gathered at the parish steps, carrying hand-painted signs. Some held nothing but empty bowls raised high. The city whispered about it before sundown. The children are marching. Carla slammed her fist on her dead laptop. They can't march. Cole will crush them. and, leaning against the bell frame, only said, "Or he'll be forced to show himself." Her eyes flicked to me. "The question is, Jonah, will you let them?" That night I couldn't sleep. The ledger lay open before me, blank page glaring. If I let the children march, their names might be the next written. I gripped the rook until my hand ached. Straight lines. But no line felt straight here. Anne's voice broke the dark. "You can hold soldiers in cages. You can silence deserters with doubt. But you cannot chain a child's hunger. Their march is not yours to stop, it's theirs to claim." I said nothing. The bell tolled once in the wind as if answering for me. At dawn the march began. Dozens of children filed into the street, bare feet slapping cracked pavement, empty bowls and cardboard signs held high. Behind them, mothers and grandmothers walked, arms linked. Fathers trailed with nothing but prayers. The parish bells tolled with each step. Families leaned from windows, banging pots, joining the rhythm. The city awoke to a sound louder than any gunshot, the sound of hunger refusing to hide. Cole reacted within the hour. His armored trucks rolled alongside the march, screens blaring his voice. "These children are being exploited by insurgents. Mercer hides behind their innocence. Stability demands they return to safety immediately." But the cameras didn't lie. Carla's drones caught the truth. The children walked calmly, steadily, bowls raised, no violence, no fear. Crowds poured from side streets to join them. Not with rifles. With bread crusts, apples, scraps. They handed food to the bowls as offerings, a silent declaration. "We feed each other, not him." The march reached the square by noon. Floodlights snapped on. Mercenaries lined the barricades, rifles gleaming. The children did not stop. They walked until they stood face to face with armored men. Empty bowls raised. Straight lines unbroken. The city held its breath. Cole appeared on the screens above, his calm face stretched across steel. "Return home," he ordered. "This display ends now. Stability does not bend to childish games." But the children lifted their voices together, a ragged chant. "Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit." The crowd echoed louder, louder, until the chant rolled like thunder. Carla whispered in my ear, her voice shaking. "The feed is everywhere. Every alley, every rooftop. He can't shut it out." The mercenaries faltered. Some lowered rifles. Others shifted uneasily. No one fired. Cole's voice snapped sharper, brittle under the calm. "Stand your ground. Maintain order." But order had already cracked. And stepped into the square then, her gray coat catching the floodlight. She walked beside the children, empty bowl in hand. She raised it high, her voice carrying. "If stability means starving a child, then stability is the true chaos." The chant erupted again, deafening. "Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit." The bell tolled from the parish, echoing the words. And Cole's silence in that moment was louder than any command. By dusk, the march returned to the parish. No bullets fired. No children taken. Families embraced, tears streaming, bowls still lifted like banners. In the nave, the children placed their bowls on the altar, surrounding the ledger. A circle of hunger turned into proof. I closed the book without writing a single name. For once, a blank page felt like victory. And stood beside me, her eyes softer than I had ever seen. "You see now? Sometimes the straightest line isn't a blade. It's a child holding an empty bowl." The rook pressed into my palm, lighter than it had ever been. For a moment, the siege felt less like a cage. It felt like a march. Straight, loud, unbroken. The morning after the march, the city woke to something it hadn't seen in weeks. Food on every corner. Stalls appeared overnight, neat rows of bread and rice stacked high, guarded by mercenaries who smiled thin smiles. No coins required. No rings. No heirlooms. Just hands held out and food dropped in. The screens on trucks blared with Cole's voice. "Stability provides. Not chaos. Not insurgents. Every child deserves a meal, every family safety. Return to order, and you will never go hungry again." Crowds surged toward the stalls, torn between disbelief and relief. Mothers clutched loaves as if they were miracles. Fathers wept openly. Children bit into apples with juice running down their faces. And the parish bells tolled into silence. Inside the nave, the families argued. Maybe he's changed. Maybe the march worked. Maybe we don't need this fight anymore. Carla slammed her fist on the altar. "It's bait. You don't flood a starved city with food overnight unless you've been hoarding it." Naya growled, "He's flipping the march into his own triumph." Yesterday bowls in the air made him look weak. Today loaves in hands make him look merciful. An's voice slid in like smoke. Mercy staged is still power. And power is all he needs. The ledger lay open in front of me, blank page waiting, heavy as stone. I walked the streets myself. The ash markets were gone, replaced by stability stalls. Lines of people waited quietly, mercenaries handing out bread like priests at communion. I saw a woman who had chanted beside us yesterday now kissing a soldier's hand, whispering thanks. I saw a boy trade his rook carving, one of ours, for a sweet roll stamped with the sunburst emblem. The rook in my pocket burned. That night, Carla pulled me aside, her voice low. We have proof. Stashes under the civic hall, warehouses packed for weeks. He could have fed them all along. He starved them just long enough to make his mercy look like salvation. Her hands shook as she held up a crude transmitter. If I can patch this, I can show them the stockpiles. Make them see the truth. Naya scowled. Or maybe you'll show them bread they already ate. Proof doesn't matter when a child's stomach is full. The parish split again. Some argued Cole's food was survival, better than ideals. Others shouted that it was poison, control disguised as generosity. Anne watched it all with those knife-edge eyes, saying nothing. Later she found me by the bell. He's clever. He took your march and made it his. Chaos became order again, at least to the eyes of the hungry. I gritted my teeth. Then we starve while they feed. Her head tilted. No. You must make them remember who starved them first. Memory is hungrier than the body. If they forget, you lose. If they remember, no loaf will ever taste sweet. The next day Cole made his move sharper. Children lined up at his stalls were handed more than bread. They were given armbands with the sunburst emblem. His broadcasts called them young guards of stability. Smiling faces on screens, mouths full, bowls replaced with insignia. The city cheered. The same voices that had chanted relief, not profit, now whispered stability feeds. The parish grew restless, whispers slicing through the nave. Carla shouted, "He's building an army out of hunger. He's turning your march into his militia." Naya hurled her crutch across the floor. "Then we break his stalls, burn them to ash." An's voice finally cut through. "No. Burning food makes you monsters. You want to fight his gift? Show them the theft it hides." That night, Carla's transmitter sparked to life. Grainy images flickered on the cracked wall of the sacristy. Warehouses stacked to the ceiling, crates unopened, loaves molding in corners. The proof was there. But would the city care when their mouths were full? I stared at the rook, its edges cutting into my palm. Straight lines. No curves. "We make them care," I whispered. "Tomorrow we don't march with bowls. We march with proof." The bell tolled once, deep and hollow. Children lifted their bowls again, but this time with photographs taped inside. Families raised scraps of cardboard, painted not with bread but with the word, hoarded. The march was smaller, thinner. Many had chosen to eat instead. But those who remained carried fire in their eyes, not hunger. Cole's stalls looked on as the march passed, mercenaries tightening their grips. And for the first time the city saw two lines moving side by side. One fed, one defiant. The fracture was no longer hidden. It walked the streets in daylight. The third march began at dawn. This time the bowls weren't empty. They were filled with photographs Carla had smuggled out of the warehouses, grainy prints of crates stacked to ceilings, loaves molding under tarps, rice spilling from sacks left to rot. Children carried them high, taped inside their bowls like holy icons. Mothers held cardboard painted with a single word, hoarded. The parish bell tolled with every step. Not hunger this time, memory. But Cole had prepared his own parade. From side streets, ranks of children in crisp uniforms marched out, sunburst armbands glowing, bread in their hands. The young guards of stability. Their bowls were full, their stomachs fed, their smiles rehearsed. Screens mounted on armored trucks broadcast Cole's voice. "Chaos starves you. Stability feeds you. Which child will you follow, the one with proof of lies, or the one with bread in hand?" The city split before its own eyes. At the center of the square the two lines met. Our children lifted their bowls, photographs fluttering in the wind. Cole's children raised their loaves, golden crusts gleaming. The crowd surrounding them gasped, torn between the two visions, truth or bread, memory or survival. Carla's drone hovered above, streaming every angle. "They're both on camera," she whispered through the comm. "Everyone sees the choice now." Naya, leaning heavy on her crutch, hissed, "It's not a choice. It's a trap. He's daring us to lash out, bread against bowls, child against child. One spark and he'll paint us monsters." Anne's eyes narrowed, her voice low. Then don't give him the spark. Make him strike first. Cole's mercenaries lined the barricades, rifles slung but ready. Their orders were clear: let the spectacle fester until one side snapped. The chanting began. Our children, hoarded, hoarded. His children, stability feeds. Back and forth, louder, sharper, until the square shook with echoes. A boy on our side, no more than 10, lifted his bowl so high the photograph fell out, fluttering to the ground. He bent to grab it. One of the young guards laughed, waved his loaf like a trophy. You want food? Take it. He hurled the bread. It struck the boy's face, crumbs scattering. The square erupted. Our children cried out, bowls raised like shields. Parents surged forward, voices ragged. The young guards jeered, throwing more loaves, bread turning into stones in the air. The mercenaries tensed, waiting for us to strike back. But I grabbed the bell rope and pulled with all my strength. The clang thundered across the square, silencing the chaos. Straight lines. I roared, my voice cracking. No curves. The parish crowd echoed, a wave of defiance. Straight lines. Our children didn't throw bowls. They lifted them higher, photographs shining. And stepped into the space between the two groups, coat whipping in the wind. She raised an empty bowl, her voice sharp as a blade. Bread without memory is slavery. Bowls without truth are coffins. The chant rose again, deafening. Hoarded, hoarded. The young guards faltered. Some lowered their loaves. One ripped off his armband, dropping it into the dust. Cameras caught it all, Carla's drone feeding it live, Cole's own screens betraying him. Then from the barricades a baton swung. A mercenary cracked a mother across the face, her sign splintering. She fell hard, blood pooling at her temple. The square froze. Cole's calm voice boomed from the screens, brittle now. Maintain order. Disperse immediately. But the image betrayed him. His soldiers striking first, bread flying like stones, bowls lifted without violence. The city had seen. The mercenaries pressed forward, but their line fractured. Some dropped batons. Others turned their visors away, ashamed. The crowd surged, not with fists but with voices. Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit. The chant swallowed the square, drowning Cole's broadcasts. By dusk, the march returned to the parish. Bloodied but unbroken, bowls dented, photographs torn, but spirits alight. Carla collapsed against her drone rig, whispering. The feed spread everywhere. They saw it. They all saw it. Naya gripped the bell rope with trembling hands, eyes fierce. He struck first. He showed his teeth. And stood by the altar, her bowl still raised, her voice calm. And now the city knows which children walk with memory and which with chains. That night I opened the ledger. For once I didn't see blank pages demanding names. I saw bowls. Empty, dented, filled with proof. And for the first time, I wondered if the ledger's true power wasn't in recording the dead, but in refusing to write down the living. Straight lines. Unbroken. But now carried by children who refused to bend. Cole's empire was built on control of the lens. But after the children's march, the lens betrayed him. Every alley replayed the same moment. A mercenary cracking a mother's skull, bowls lifted high in silence, and his own soldiers lowering batons in shame. For the first time his calm voice didn't soothe. It sounded brittle. Desperate. Footage manipulated, he declared on every screen. Mercer's insurgents edited chaos into stability. But the city had seen the truth uncut. And no amount of edits could erase memory. 2 nights later he struck. Floodlights roared over the parish, brighter than ever. Drones screamed above, their lenses red. Trucks blocked every exit, speakers blaring one command. Mercer. Deliver the children. Those who marched. They are enemies of stability. Gasps tore through the nave. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Fathers shouted curses. Naya slammed her crutch to the floor. He wants them now. After all that. Anne's voice cut through, steady but sharp. He doesn't want them alive. He wants the image. Children dragged out, bowls shattering. That picture erases the last one. Carla's hands shook over her transmitter. If we hide them, he'll call it proof we exploit them. If we surrender them, they're gone. The rook in my palm felt heavier than ever. Straight lines. But there was no straight way through this. The parish divided again. Some begged to hand the children to relatives, to scatter them into the city. Others screamed to hold the line, to ring the bell until walls cracked. And stepped onto the altar, gray coat brushing the ledger. Cole has chosen the battlefield. But he forgot, we already own the bell. If he wants the children, then let him try in daylight with the whole city watching. The mothers looked at me. The children looked at me. I closed the ledger with a snap. Then we make him choke on it. At dawn the square filled again. But this time it wasn't bowls or bread. It was silence. Children stood in neat rows before the parish, bowls at their feet, hands clasped. Behind them mothers and fathers. Behind them deserters and soldiers. Behind them the cracked bell. No chants. No chaos. Just silence heavy as stone. Cole's trucks rolled in. Mercenaries advanced. Cameras zoomed. Cole himself appeared on the central screen, his voice trembling under its calm veneer. These children are tools of Mercer's lies. Take them. The mercenaries moved forward. But the children didn't flinch. And walked to the front row, standing among them, bowl in hand. She lifted it high. If you take them, you take me. If you call them chaos, then call me chaos too. The silence cracked into murmurs. Some mercenaries shifted, visors trembling. One lowered his rifle. The bell tolled once, rolling across the square like thunder. Cole's voice snapped, sharp now, fire. But no shots came. Instead, Carla's drone buzzed overhead, hijacking the feed. Across the city, every screen flickered, not Cole's calm face but live footage of the square. Children standing. Bowls at their feet. Mercenaries frozen, rifles limp. The truth unfolded raw and uncut. Cole had commanded slaughter. His men had refused. The crowd surged, not with fists but with sound. Bells clanged from rooftops. Pots banged. Voices rose. Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit. Cole's trucks revved engines, retreating under the noise. Drones sputtered, feet collapsing. And for the first time, Cole's silence was not chosen. It was forced. Back in the parish, children placed their bowls on the altar again, not as proof of hunger this time, but as proof of survival. Carla collapsed beside her rig, whispering, "We stole the lens from him." The city saw. He can't erase it now. Naya leaned against the bell, blood trickling from her lip, but her smile fierce. We didn't bend. And set her bowl beside the Rook, her voice soft but unyielding. He wanted to turn children into weapons. Instead they became his mirror. That night I opened the ledger. The blank page stared back, waiting for names. But no one had died. Not this time. I pressed the Rook into the paper, leaving a faint indentation. A line without ink. A move made without blood. For once, silence belonged to us. The bell tolled 7 times. Not for the straight 7 this time. Not for martyrs. But for children who had faced rifles and did not bend. The city listened. And somewhere in the dark, I knew Cole had heard it too. The ledger had always been my anchor. Its weight steadied me, its blank pages dared me to speak truth when words faltered. Every name written was proof that silence had teeth. Every circle and notch, a mark against Cole's empire. But after the children's march, the book began to feel different. Heavier. Hungrier. Each night I opened it, blank pages stared back as if waiting not for the dead but for me. Cole struck where it hurt most, in the symbol itself. Screens lit up across the city, broadcasting an image of a ledger, not mine but a copy, clean and staged. His voice, calm as always, wrapped around it. Mercer keeps a book of names. He decides who lives, who dies, who belongs. He calls it justice. But it is nothing but a death list. A tyrant's list. Gasps rippled through the parish when the feed reached us. Families clutched each other, whispering. Even deserters shifted uneasily. Carla swore, slamming her laptop shut. He stole the symbol. Flipped it. Made it look like you're no better than him. Naya spat on the floor. He's calling you executioner. Anne's eyes, sharp as knives, didn't leave the screen. He's not calling him executioner. He's calling him king. A man with a book writes laws, writes destinies. Cole is making you look like what he fears most. His reflection. The parish cracked under it. Some families demanded I burn the ledger. Others begged me to keep it, to remind them their suffering had been recorded. One father shouted, "If my daughter's name is in that book, what does it mean? That she lived? Or that she died for nothing?" The nave roared with arguments. The bell rope swayed in Naya's trembling hand, but she didn't ring it. For the first time, the sound of silence inside the parish was more frightening than the floodlights outside. That night, I sat alone with the book open. My hand hovered with the pen but I couldn't write. Every blank page felt like a blade turned inward. And appeared, her voice low. Cole's ledger is fiction. Yours is faith. But faith can fracture. What will you do when the people believe his copy more than your truth? I clenched the Rook until my palm bled. Then I break the board itself. Her eyes glinted. Careful. When you break boards, pieces scatter. Cole pushed harder. His men raided blocks at random, dragging families into trucks. Then on screens he showed names scrawled on his counterfeit ledger, accusing those families of being Mercer's chosen. Mercer condemns them, Cole intoned. I save them. He turned my weapon into his own. The parish reeled. Mothers wept, convinced their children's names were cursed in the book. Fathers shouted at me, demanding to see the pages. Some even tried to tear it from my hands. Naya knocked one to the floor, snarling, "This ledger is ours. You don't get to burn it just because you're afraid." But fear spread faster than fire. Carla pulled me aside, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. "Jonah, we need to show them the real ledger. Every page, every name. Let them see it's not a death list. It's memory." And shook her head. "And when the city sees the names of their dead, what then? They'll call it prophecy. A curse. Proof that everyone written down ends the same way." The argument cut deep. For the first time, I wondered if keeping the ledger meant I was doing Cole's work for him. That night, the bell tolled once, but it didn't echo. The city didn't answer. I opened the ledger again, staring at the latest names, the straight 7, their sacrifice turned to proof. Now, Cole had painted them as execution victims. My hand trembled. The rook pressed sharp against my skin. Straight lines. But the line blurred. I whispered into the silence, "Am I still keeping memory, or am I writing their deaths myself?" The page did not answer. But Anne's voice from the shadows did. "The book doesn't break itself, Jonah. You break it, or you make it unbreakable. Too soon. Because Cole already has." The next strike didn't come with bullets or gas. It came with names. Cole's trucks rolled into the market square, screens lit brighter than daylight. A soldier in polished armor carried a leather-bound book, his forged ledger, and placed it on a podium as if it were scripture. Cole's face filled the screens. "Come. Patient. Like a teacher before children. Mercer claims to fight for you. But see what he truly keeps, a death list. Names chosen not by law, not by order, but by his own hand. Tonight we read them aloud." The soldier opened the counterfeit book. The crowd leaned forward, breath caught in their throats. The first name he read was a boy taken 2 nights ago. His mother screamed from the barricades, clutching his shoes. Lies. He never even met Mercer. But Cole's voice rolled smooth. "Mercer marked him. I delivered him. Stability saved him." The crowd wavered. Some cried. Some believed. The next names cut deeper. Families pulled closer, some begging for proof, others already accusing me in absentia. By the 3rd page, chants rose, "Death list. Death list." Carla slammed her fists into her broken rig as the feed streamed into the parish. "He's turning your weapon into a curse." Naya paced like a caged animal. "If the people believe that book, it doesn't matter what's inside yours. They'll burn it with you still holding it." And stood apart, arms folded. "You've run out of time, Jonah. Cole owns the stage. The city sees his ledger, not yours." Her eyes met mine. "So either burn your book and let the idea die, or open it for the whole city and dare them to choose." The parish roared with fear. Families shouted, demanding to see the real ledger. Deserters argued, some insisting transparency would prove truth, others warning it would kill us. A mother screamed at me, "If my child's name is in your book, tell me now." Her cry shook the nave. Others joined. The pressure built until even Naya's voice couldn't hold it back. I climbed onto the altar, rook in hand, ledger under my arm. The bell rope swung above me, trembling in the draft. "You want the book?" I shouted. "You'll have it. But not in whispers. Not in shadows. In daylight. Before the city. Let every name stand." The decision split us even deeper. Carla pleaded, "Jonah, once it's open you can't control what they see. They'll call it curse, prophecy, madness." Anne's voice was a blade. "Or they'll see memory. Proof. The kind Cole cannot forge." Naya slammed her crutch on the stone floor. "Enough. We march tomorrow. Ledger in the open. If it breaks us, better broken than bent." The bell tolled once, sealing the vow. At dawn the square filled again. This time not with bowls, not with bread. With a book. I carried the ledger to the center, the rook pressed on its cover. Families swarmed around, eyes wide with suspicion, hope, and fear. Cole's truck circled, cameras streaming, his soldiers ready. His voice echoed, "There it is, the tyrant's list. The proof of chaos." I set the ledger on the altar of stone steps. My hands shook, but I opened it wide. The city leaned in breathless. Inside, names. Dozens. Hundreds. Not chosen. Not condemned. Recorded. I lifted the Rook. These are not curses. These are not death sentences. These are memories. Proof that silence does not erase. Every name in here lived, fought, endured. Cole would have you forget them. I write so you cannot. Carla's drone streamed it all. The crowd stirred. Some cried at the sight of their dead written in careful ink. Others screamed that the book had doomed them. Cole's voice sharpened. Mercer admits it. He writes names. He claims power over life and death. The square fractured into shouts. Then Anne stepped forward. She tore a page from the book and held it high. This is not prophecy. It's history. Do you curse a gravestone because it bears a name? Or do you remember the person it belongs to? Her words cut like the bell. The crowd roared back, half in fury, half in faith. Cole's soldiers tightened their grips. Some raised rifles. The bell tolled once, then twice. And in the silence after, a child's voice rang out from the crowd. Write my name, Mercer. So I'm not forgotten. Others echoed. Write mine. Write mine. The square shivered with it. Cole's lie cracked, even as his soldiers pushed forward. That night, back in the parish, the ledger lay heavier than ever. Families pressed scraps of paper into my hands, begging for names to be written. And whispered in the shadows, you see? The book no longer belongs to you. It belongs to them. And that terrifies him. I closed the ledger slowly, Rook resting atop its cover. Straight lines. Still unbroken. But now etched across an entire city. The ledger had shifted. No longer a secret burden pressed under my coat, it had become public, a symbol families reached for with trembling hands. They begged me to write names, not to curse them but to keep them alive. But Cole understood faster than anyone. Symbols can be sharpened into weapons. The broadcast began at dawn. His voice rolled from every screen, measured, steady, as if he were reading bedtime stories to a restless city. Mercer now writes names of the living. He promises remembrance, but remembrance is only another kind of death. How long before he writes all of you into his book? How long before the city itself becomes his death list? The screen flickered to show doctored images. My ledger filled with endless columns of names, page after page, scrolling faster than eyes could follow. Then his voice dropped, calm but final. He will write your name before you die. And by writing it, he will make it so. The effect was instant. Families in the parish recoiled from the book. Mothers pulled children away from me. Fathers demanded I stop writing altogether. One woman screamed, my husband's name is in there. You killed him with your pen. The nave trembled with fear. Naya slammed her crutch against the stone floor. Enough. Cole wrote the death, not Jonah. The book is proof, not prophecy. But fear spread quicker than truth. That night, deserters whispered of whole neighborhoods refusing to answer the bell. They say the ledger is cursed, one muttered. They say if Mercer writes your name, your fate is sealed. The Rook felt heavier in my hand, edges biting into skin. Straight lines. But now the line bent into superstition, twisted by Cole's lies. Carla refused to let it stand. She dragged her battered rig into the nave, sparks flying as she wired it into the bell's frame. I can project it. Every page, every name. Show them it isn't a curse, just ink. If they see it all, maybe the fear dies. And stepped from the shadows, her voice sharp. Or maybe the fear grows. Pages filled with the dead, broadcast into every home? Families will see not proof but prophecy fulfilled. Her eyes cut toward me. Cole wants you trapped. Burn the book and betray them, or open it wider and drown them. The parish divided again. Some demanded Carla's plan. Others begged me to end the ledger once and for all. The children, bowls still dented from their march, whispered among themselves. One boy clutched my sleeve, whispering, "Don't stop writing. If you stop, we'll vanish." His words dug deeper than any blade. That night I sat alone with the book. Blank pages stared back, each one feeling less like memory and more like a mouth, waiting to consume. I pressed the Rook into the paper, leaving faint dents. No ink. Just wait. Anne's voice came behind me. Cole doesn't fear your pen. He fears your refusal to stop using it. Because if you keep writing, you prove memory is louder than his silence. I whispered, and if the people believe the book kills them? Her reply was colder than stone. Then let them believe. Fear is also a weapon. Sometimes you wield it or it wields you. The next morning the council square filled again. Cole stood on his stage, ledger forged in hand, his voice clear. Mercer writes names. He writes futures. If you do not stop him, he will write this city to death. He gestured to the crowd. Already, whole streets vanish after their names are written. Proof that his book is the true chaos. Families sobbed. Soldiers nodded grimly. Fear thickened the air. Then from the back of the crowd, a child's voice broke through. "Write my name, Mercer." Gasp. The square froze. The boy climbed onto a crate, bowl in hand, his face smeared with ash but eyes blazing. "Write it so I won't vanish. Write it so he can't erase me." Other children joined, shouting, "Write mine. Write mine." Carla's drone caught it all, feeding the chaos into every home. Cole's face cracked on the screen. Calm fractured into rage. "Fools. He curses you and you beg for more. He will bury you all." But the chant grew louder. "Write my name. Write my name." I lifted the Rook high, the ledger open in my other hand. This book does not kill. Remembers? Cole starves, Cole strikes, Cole silences, but he cannot erase what is written. The bell tolled, rolling across the square. Families cheered, children raised bowls, deserters shouted, "Relief, not profit." And for the first time, Cole's voice faltered into silence. Back in the parish, I wrote the boy's name. Slowly, carefully. The ink sank deep into the page. Naya leaned over my shoulder, her voice low. "He just made you more dangerous than ever. Half the city believes you can curse them. The other half believes you can save them." Anne's shadow lingered by the altar, her tone unreadable. "And both halves are power. Power Cole can't steal." I closed the book. The Rook pressed hard against its cover. Straight lines. No curves. But now the line carved not just memory, fear itself. Cole's empire had always depended on silence. But now the city shouted a new chant, "Write my name." And every voice chipped at his throne. He had tried twisting the ledger into a curse. Instead it became a mirror reflecting his fear. There was only one move left to him: break the book itself. The first sign came at midnight. Carla caught a burst of encrypted chatter across stolen comms. Target is the parish. High priority. Objective, recover or destroy ledger. Her eyes widened. He's coming for the book, Jonah? Not the bell. Not the children. The book. Naya tightened the sling on her shoulder, jaw hard. Then we make him bleed for every page. But and only said, he doesn't need to hold it. He only needs to make the city believe it's gone. Her gaze fixed on me. If the ledger burns, what will you hold up instead? The Rook in my pocket felt heavier than stone. The raid hit just before dawn. Floodlights seared through stained glass, shattering colors across the nave. Drones screamed overhead, their cameras red. Doors splintered under steel boots. Parish secured, voices barked. Recover the ledger. The family screamed, scattering. Deserters opened fire from the choir loft, muzzle flashes tearing through smoke. Naya roared, swinging her crutch like a club as mercenaries poured in. Through it all, my hands clutched the ledger tight against my chest. One soldier lunged, baton raised. Harker, one of the surviving straight seven, threw himself in the way, taking the blow across his skull. Blood sprayed, but he didn't fall. He drove the soldier back, snarling, "Not this book. Not tonight." Carla screamed into her transmitter, "Stream it. Stream everything." Screens across the city lit up, not Cole's feed but ours. The whole siege laid bare. Soldiers storming a church, families clutching children, a book clutched like scripture against the light. And moved like a blade through the smoke, dragging civilians to cover, her gray coat whipping behind her. A soldier grabbed her arm, shouting, "Target identified, Klein." She spat in his face and slammed him against the altar. "Your master fears paper more than bullets," she hissed. "That's why you'll lose." The fight raged, louder than any sermon. But they kept coming, wave after wave, eyes locked on the ledger. A baton smashed into my ribs, knocking the breath from me. The book slipped from my grip, skidding across the stone floor. Gasps tore through the nave. Mercenaries dove for it. Naya hurled herself into the fray, crutch swinging. Over my dead body. She smashed one soldier's visor, then another, before collapsing under the weight of three. The ledger slid closer to the floodlit doorway. Cole's men surged. Then the bell tolled. Carla had wired her transmitter directly into the cracked bronze. Each toll now carried not just sound but video, our feed blasted into every corner of the city. And the people saw, mercenaries trampling mothers, rifles aimed at children, hands reaching for the ledger as if it were crown and scepter. The city roared in answer. Pots banged, rooftops erupted in sound, bells tolled from schools and towers. The noise shook the air, rattling even Cole's soldiers. In that moment of hesitation, I lunged. My hands closed around the book. A mercenary raised his rifle to fire, and then stopped. His visor lifted. His face twisted with doubt. Behind him, another soldier lowered his weapon. The chant outside rolled in like thunder, "Write our names! Write our names!" The mercenaries faltered. Some fled. Others ripped armbands from their sleeves. The raid unraveled in chaos. By sunrise, the parish was battered but standing. Bodies lay on the floor, ours and theirs. Smoke curled from shattered pews. But the ledger was still here. Oh. Families gathered around, touching its cover as if it were alive. Children placed their bowls on top, dented and cracked but unbroken. Anne's face was pale with exhaustion, but her eyes glowed. He failed. He reached for it and the city saw him choke. Naya, bloodied but grinning, leaned against the bell rope. Let him come again. We'll toll louder. Carla slumped over her dead transmitter, whispering, they saw it all. Every page defended. Every name worth bleeding for. I opened the ledger, Rook in my hand. My ribs ached, blood slick on my fingers, but I wrote anyway. Circle. Notch. Circle. Notch. Not just the dead this time. Not just the betrayed. But the living who stood, the ones who fought for a book. Names that would not be erased. When the last mark dried, I closed it slowly. The Rook pressed firm against its cover. Straight lines. No curves. The ledger had nearly broken. But it hadn't. And in its survival, the city had seen a truth coal could never burn. A book can be heavier than an empire. The ledger had survived. Its pages now carried not just memory but defiance. But Cole understood symbols better than anyone. If he couldn't break the book, he would break the bell. Because the bell was louder. The bell spread faster than his broadcasts. Each toll was proof that the city still breathed. It began with silence. For 3 nights, the bell rope hung untouched. Not because we didn't ring it, but because the sound never reached beyond the parish. Carla tore apart her transmitter, sweat streaking her face. Jammed, she muttered. They've blanketed half the city. Every toll swallowed. Naya clenched her jaw. So he's going after the sound. And leaned against the stone wall, gray coat dusted white from mortar. He knows the book is memory. But the bell is presence. You can't fight what's remembered. But you can strangle what's alive. The next day, armored trucks rolled into the quarter. Loudspeakers blared a new decree. The bell of St. Arcturus is illegal. Noise is chaos. Silence is safety. Any attempt to ring it is treason. The words echoed like chains. Families shrank back into doorways. Children hid their bowls. Carla spat on the stone floor. He's scared of a sound. But and corrected her, voice cold. He's scared of the city knowing it's not alone. That night we gathered beneath the bell. Its cracked bronze loomed above, ropes frayed from years of tolling. I placed the Rook on the altar, the ledger beside it. He'll come for it soon, I said. And when he does, he won't stop at jamming signals. He'll shatter it to dust. Naya gripped the rope with her good hand, knuckles white. Then let him come. I'll wrap myself in the clapper if I have to. Carla's eyes burned with exhaustion. We could hide it. Dismantle it, move the pieces underground. But Anne's voice cut sharp. If you hide the bell, it dies anyway. The city must see it. Hear it. Or it's just metal. The raid came 2 nights later. Floodlights carved the nave into blinding white. Mercenaries stormed through shattered doors. Not for the ledger this time, they bypassed the altar entirely. Their boots thundered up the belfry stairs. The bell? Naya roared. They're going for the bell. Chaos erupted. Deserters fired upward into the spiral stairwell. Families dragged children into pews. Carla screamed into her rig, sparks flying as she forced a signal past the jam. Stream it. Stream everything. And seized the rope with both hands, pulling hard. The bell groaned, clapper swinging. The first toll rolled across stone, deep and cracked. Another. And another. The sound rattled dust from the rafters. Mercenaries reached the belfry. Rifles barked. Stone chipped. The bell shuddered under their boots. One soldier swung a sledgehammer, smashing the bronze rim. A fracture split wider across its side. But the toll rang again, louder, broken metal singing like thunder. The city heard it. Even jammed, even fractured, the sound carried. Below, families cheered through tears. Children clutched bowls to their chests, voices rising. Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit. Carla's drone caught every frame. Soldiers striking a church bell, sparks flying, bronze cracking, but still tolling. And rope burns tearing her palms, shouted through the din. You can break metal but you cannot silence memory. Her voice carried with the toll. The mercenaries panicked. Their orders were clear: silence the bell. But with every hammer blow, the sound only grew stranger, wilder, more alive. The fracture deepened, jagged as a wound. Yet the bell kept tolling. Straight lines. No curves. At last the commander roared, "Retreat!" Boots pounded down the stairs. Floodlights cut out. Trucks pulled away, engines howling. And above us the bell swung one last time, cracked nearly in half. The sound that rolled across the city wasn't pure, it was broken, jagged, a roar more than a note. But it was ours. At dawn, families gathered beneath the fractured bronze. Mothers touched its scarred surface with reverence. Children traced the crack with their fingers, whispering. Carla slumped against the wall, voice hoarse. The feed spread. They saw soldiers try to break it. They saw it ring anyway. Naya, bloodied but grinning, leaned on her crutch. Let him try again. The louder he hits, the louder it sings. Anne's palms were raw, rope burned, but her eyes burned brighter than ever. The bell is broken. But now it speaks with two voices, the one Cole fears and the one he cannot predict. That night I opened the ledger. I didn't write names. Instead, I pressed the rook hard into the page, leaving a groove without ink. Because some victories weren't written. They were heard. The bell had cracked. But its voice had become unbreakable. The bell still hung above us, fractured and scarred, but alive. Every toll now came out jagged, less a note than a roar. Families said it sounded like anger itself, the city's wound singing back. Cole could not erase that sound. So he tried to drown it. 3 nights after the raid, a new noise rolled across the quarter. Not the broken thunder of our bell, but a deep, pure chime, polished, perfect, without fracture. Another bell. Carla jolted upright from her nest of wires. That's not ours. Naya snarled, grip tightening on her crutch. Then whose? We climbed to the roof. Across the skyline, floodlights lit a new tower rising from steel scaffolds. At its crown, a bell gleamed silver under the night. Cole's soldiers stood guard at its base, their visors glowing. Loudspeakers proclaimed, "Noise is chaos. Silence is safety. The true bell of stability tolls for order." And the chime rang again, smooth, flawless, drowning ours. The city staggered. Families leaned from windows, confused. Some said the new bell sounded like salvation, clean, holy. Others spat, saying only the cracked bell carried truth. Cole had split the city with food before, with ledgers. Now he would split it with sound. And watched the silver tower rise, her voice a knife. He wants the people to choose. His bell or ours? Perfection or fracture? Her eyes cut to me. And perfection is a seductive lie. That night we tried to toll. Naya yanked the rope, hands blistered. The cracked bell groaned, voice jagged. Then Cole's bell answered, smooth and thunderous, echoing louder. The city heard 2 voices clash, ours like a wound, his like a hymn. Families argued in the nave, some swearing the true sound was purity, others crying that only scars spoke real. Carla slammed her fists into her broken rig. We can't compete. His is wired into half the city. Amplifiers, towers. He built a machine to drown us. And whispered, almost to herself, then don't compete. Corrupt it. The next dawn, Carla hacked. She patched cables into the cracked bronze, sparks flying. If I can hijack his amplifiers, I can splice our toll through his speakers. Imagine, his bell ringing our sound. Naya laughed through gritted teeth. Turn his hymn into our roar. Button shook her head. Careful. If you splice too much, the city will hear nothing but noise. And Cole will say we proved him right. The rook dug into my palm, the ledger heavy at my side. Straight lines. No curves. But this war was nothing but curves. That evening, Cole staged a ceremony. Screens flared alive, showing crowds gathered beneath the silver bell. Soldiers stood like statues. Cole himself appeared in white robes, arms raised as if conducting a choir. The false bell cracks, his voice intoned. The true bell sings. He gestured. The silver bell tolled, its perfect sound rolling across the city. But then Carla slammed her fist on her transmitter. Sparks burst. The cracked bronze above us shuddered. And suddenly the silver bell's flawless tone twisted, splitting into jagged echoes, fractured roars. Cole's face froze. For a moment, his perfection carried our wound. Crowds gasped. Some laughed, some cheered. Others screamed in confusion. Cole snarled, shoving soldiers aside, shouting off mic. But the city had already heard it, his bell bending to ours. The parish roared, children banging bowls against the pews, chanting, "Relief, not profit." The cracked bell tolled again, louder, broken voice carried on Cole's own speakers. But victory carried a cost. Sparks flew from Carla's rig, smoke choking her lungs. She collapsed coughing, hands blistered. "I can't hold it," signals burning out. The feed died. The silver bell rang pure once more, smooth and flawless. Cole's calm face returned to the screens. "See how chaos corrupts. See how noise twists truth. Only stability remains clean." And the crowd, shaken by the sudden return of perfection, wavered again. Back in the parish, families argued into the night. "It's proof. We bent his bell." "No, it's proof he can bend it back." Which sound is true? Which voice belongs to us? The nave shook with confusion louder than faith. Anne's voice cut through, cold and certain. "He wants you to question the bell until you forget why it rings. He doesn't care which sound wins. He cares that you doubt both." I opened the ledger, Rook pressed on its spine. Blank pages glared. For the first time I wondered if no symbol could survive untouched. At dawn the two bells tolled together. "Is pure. Ours broken." The city listened, torn between wound and hymn. And I realized, the fight was no longer about silence. It was about memory. Would they remember a sound scarred and human, or a sound flawless and false? The next move would decide. Cole's silver bell tolled perfect, unbroken. Our cracked bronze answered jagged, furious. Two voices, two truths clashing over the city. The people were dizzy with noise. Some clung to his hymn. Others swore only the fractured roar carried their hunger. And for the first time since the siege began I understood. If we kept dueling sound against sound he would win. Because his bell would always be louder, cleaner, more polished. The only way forward was not to break his bell, but to carry ours into the streets. The idea came from the children. They had once marched with bowls, then with photographs. Now they banged those bowls with spoons, making clattering rhythms that rolled down alleys like drums of defiance. Carla recorded it, eyes wide. "If we amplify this, not through hacked towers but through bodies, through movement." Naya grinned through split lips. "Then the whole city becomes the bell." Anne's voice slid in like smoke. "March of sound. Not bronze, not silver. Human. And no empire can forge that." I placed the Rook on the altar, the ledger opened beside it. Straight lines, no curves. "Then tomorrow we march." At dawn the parish emptied into the streets. Children at the front, bowls in hand. Behind them mothers with pans, fathers with pipes, deserters with rifles slung but hands clapping rhythms. The cracked bell tolled above, each jagged note answered by thousands of smaller clangs. The noise swelled, messy, uneven, imperfect. But alive. Carla's drone streamed it raw. The feed is clean. They're hearing it everywhere. Cole's silver bell answered, pure and heavy. His soldiers told it again and again, the flawless chime booming from towers. But something strange happened. The city didn't stop. The march only grew louder. Every clang, every pot, every child's bowl turned into an echo of the cracked bronze. Imperfect noise rolling over perfect sound. And raised her voice above the din. "His bell rings because machines tell it to. Ours rings because we do." The crowd erupted. Cole's screens flared, his calm face stretched across rooftops. "This is chaos. Noise without meaning. They will devour themselves." But as he spoke, his broadcast faltered. The drone feed cut him off, showing not his silver tower but families on rooftops, beating pans in rhythm with the march. Naya barked a laugh. "He can't drown this. Not when the city itself is ringing." The march of sound reached the civic square by noon. The cracked bell tolled in the distance, its roar carried by thousands of human echoes. Cole's silver bell answered, flawless but isolated, each perfect note swallowed by living noise. The crowd surrounded his tower. Soldiers braced at its base, rifles raised. But even they could not drown the sound. One soldier lowered his weapon, then another. A third dropped his armband, covering his ears as the chants rolled over him. "Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit." Then Cole himself appeared on the screen above the square, face taut. His voice trembled under the calm. "You mistake noise for strength. But noise dies. Silence survives." He gestured. His soldiers swung the silver bell harder. Its tone crashed over the square, clear, booming. But the people answered, bowls crashing, voices howling, the cracked bell tolling once more. The two sounds collided, not in harmony but in war. And the city chose. They chose fracture over perfection. The silver bell's tone faltered. Not because it broke, But because no one listened, families turned their backs to it, chanting louder, striking bowls against the stone steps of the tower. The march surged forward. Soldiers fell back, rifles slack, and lifted her bowl high, her voice a blade. "You cannot outsing the hungry." The cracked bell tolled again, and this time even Cole's flawless chime seemed thin. By dusk, the march of sound returned to the parish. Exhausted, blistered, bruised, but alive. The cracked bell swung overhead, fractured voice still raw. But it no longer stood alone. The city had become its choir. Carla collapsed beside her rig, laughing through tears. We didn't just ring a bell. We made the city into one. Naya leaned on her crutch, face smeared with soot. Straight lines don't need bronze. They've got feet. And stood in shadow, her eyes glinting. Perfection failed. Fracture endured. That is what terrifies him most. That night I opened the ledger. I didn't write names. Instead, I dipped the Rook's edge in ink and pressed it against the page, leaving a single straight mark. Not a record of death. Not even memory. But a sound etched silent on paper, proof that fracture had become unbreakable. The bell had cracked. And now the city itself rang. The march of sound had rattled Cole's grip. For the first time, the silver bell stood silent, its flawless chime ignored. The city had chosen fracture over perfection. But Cole was not a man to linger in silence. If he could not drown our bell, he would bury it. 2 nights after the march, deserters intercepted chatter. Tower demolition. Primary target, cracked bell. Objective, collapsed structure. Remove symbol entirely. Carla's hands shook on the comm wire. He's not going to jam it or forge it this time. He's going to kill it. Naya spat on the stone floor, her eyes blazing. Let him try. I'll chain myself to the clapper before I let him touch it. Anne's voice was colder, sharper. Chains won't matter against explosives. He doesn't want to silence us, he wants rubble for proof. See, he'll say. Chaos devours itself. The Rook felt like a stone in my hand. Straight lines. But this line pointed toward collapse. We had 2 choices. Defend the tower to the death. Or move the bell before he struck. The parish split instantly. Families begged us to save it, to keep the voice alive. Deserters argued that moving it meant admitting defeat. Carla whispered, if it falls on camera, he wins. And leaned against the altar, her gaze locked on me. What matters isn't bronze. It's the echo. If we can carry its voice even once more louder than his blast, then he cannot erase it. We prepared through the night. Carla rigged transmitters to the cracked bronze, wiring every fracture, every scar. When it tolls, she muttered, the sound will split into 1,000 signals. Even if the tower falls, the city will hear. Naya gathered deserters, rifles ready. If they want rubble, they'll have to walk through fire. And bound her raw palms with strips of cloth. I'll hold the rope until it snaps. And I opened the ledger, blank page waiting. If this is the end, I said, then we write it. Every clang, every fracture, every voice. Dawn came with floodlights. Trucks encircled the parish, soldiers fanning out, charges strapped to their belts. Loudspeakers barked. Stand aside. The cracked bell is treason. Stability demands its silence. Families screamed. Children clutched bowls. But the rope was already in our hands. We told first. The cracked bronze groaned, shuddering under its own scars. The sound tore through the nave, broken, jagged, alive. Carla's rig sparked, signals splitting into streams that leapt across rooftops, alleys, markets. The city froze. Screens flickered. Radios hissed. And everywhere they heard it, the roar of fracture. Cole's voice boomed from the loudspeakers. End this. His soldiers surged forward, rifles raised. Explosives planted at the tower's base. Naya fired from the choir loft, shouting, over my dead body. Bullets cracked, ricocheting off stone. And pulled the rope harder, her bandaged hands bleeding. Each toll shook dust from the rafters, each groan of bronze louder than rifles. Carla screamed over the comms, the city hears you. Don't stop. Then the charges blew. The tower shuddered, stones splitting, dust billowing. The bell swung violently, the crack ripping wider. Families screamed. Children cried. And held the rope, blood soaking her bandages. One more, she roared. The clapper slammed, bronze splitting with a scream. The sound that burst out wasn't a toll. It was an explosion of noise, half roar, half death rattle. But it carried. Across the city, windows shook. Pots clattered. Dogs howled. And the people knew, it was the bell's last cry. The tower collapsed. Stone crashed, wood splintered, dust swallowing the nave. Soldiers cheered, floodlights cutting through rubble. But their cheers died as another sound rose. From rooftops. From alleys. From every street. Pots banging. Bowls clattering. Families chanting. Relief, not profit. Relief, not profit. The cracked bell was gone. But its echo was alive, multiplied 1,000-fold. Cole's screens flickered, his face pale under the floodlights. See what chaos brings: ruins, rubble, silence. But even as he spoke, his voice drowned under the city's roar. And staggered from the rubble, face bloodied, bowl raised high. You can break bronze, Cole, but you cannot break memory. Her voice carried into every alley, every market. The city answered with thunder. By sunrise, the parish was rubble. The bell lay shattered in pieces, bronze shards glinting like teeth. Families wept, touching the fragments with reverence. Deserters carried the wounded. Carla collapsed by her ruined rig, voice hoarse. It worked. The last toll went everywhere. He can't erase it now. Naya leaned on her crutch, blood dripping from her lip. Let him build 10 silver bells. The city rings louder. And stood among the fragments, her bowl dented, her hands torn. The bell cracked. The bell fell. But its echo now lives in them. That's how you win a war, not with stone but with scars. That night I opened the ledger. My hands trembled as I dipped the rook in ink. Instead of names I drew the crack, the fracture line of the bell. Circle. Notch. Circle. Notch. Not for the dead this time. For the echo. The bell had fallen. But its voice had multiplied. The morning after the bell's last cry, smoke drew its own horizon. It wasn't the clean white of demolition dust or the oily streak from armored exhaust. This smoke had weight. It sank into your clothes and made even the driest throat taste like pennies. By noon, the first word reached us through the tunnels. The ash markets were on fire. Whole rows. A dockworker panted as he stumbled into the nave, palms blistered, hair rimed gray with soot. Crates that fed us, crates that starved us, gone. They're lighting them themselves. Cole? Naya rasped, her voice sandpaper after the night of tolling and rubble. His men. Some in uniform, some in paper masks. The dockworker coughed until his ribs bent. They film it while the food burns. They say, Mercer's chaos torched your bread. Carla pressed both palms atop the altar as if steadying the room. He's burning the ledger we wrote in hunger, she said, more to herself than to us. If the markets go to ash, then the argument dies with them. Anne's face, still streaked with dried blood from the fallen tower, remained unreadable. He's cauterizing the wound, she murmured. Better a scar he can point at than a living mouth that keeps calling his name. I stared past them to the shattered apse where the bell used to hang. The bell never was the voice, it was a throat. The voice had always been the city. Now Cole was lighting that throat with matches. We split before the decision could harden into regret. Deserters for perimeter. Carla for eyes. And an eye for the smoke. Naya, bandaged and unbowed, said she'd hold the parish with what remained of the straight seven. A quartet now, limping shadows who moved like oath-bound echoes. Bring me what matters, she told me, patting the ledger beneath my coat. And don't let him make you write fire as victory. What matters? I asked. The truth you can carry, she said, and the lies you can make choke. We moved through the bowels of the city, storm drains that sounded like drums when distant boots marched overhead, service tunnels the color of old teeth, ratways that knew us by now as if we were their own. The smoke found the cracks and poured down to meet us. Every breath became an argument between the need to live and the duty to go faster. We surfaced in the second docks market, where the water lapped blackly against pylons and cranes reached into the sky like snapped fingers. Flame had a geometry all its own. It wrote triangles onto canvas awnings, mapped itself across stacked crates, raced along ropes greased by years of palm sweat and cheap oil. Mercenaries had formed a perimeter, holding the crowd back with a practiced gentleness that cameras like. Behind them, men in paper masks fed boxes into the fire with the rhythm of people loading a truck. Workday efficient, tidy. The screens on the trucks replayed the same montage on loop, our cracked bell collapsing, overlaid with a caption, Noise becomes ash. Then the feed cut to live shots of the market burning and a voice, smooth, fatherly, said, Stability cleanses. Chaos consumes. I stepped into the press of bodies before I knew I'd moved. Heat shoved against my face, ash stuck to sweat. People moaned like a choir trapped on one note. Don't, a woman hissed, grabbing my sleeve. Her eyes were red chambers. They want you to jump the barricade. One thrown bottle and we become the fire. I'm not here to throw, I said. I'm here to remember. She stared at the ledger outline under my coat as if it were a pistol. Remember me then, she said in a voice so calm it split me. My son is hungry twice, once because a man hoarded a loaf and once because a man burned it. Remember both. I nodded, but the ledger felt heavier still. I could write names, I could not write bread back into existence. Carla's whisper crackled against my ear as her drone banked above the flames. They want an image they can own. Give them one they can't edit. How? I asked. Flames make everything look like victory to the man who lit the match. Take us to the wood, she said. Not the fire. The lies don't start with the burn, they start with the spark. And tapped my shoulder, then pointed, not to the hottest heart of the blaze but to a narrow lane where a man in a paper mask stood apart, speaking into his lapel mic, waiting. Timing. Cues. A director, not a laborer. We slid along the edges, past a family spooning water from a bucket onto crates as if the sea itself could be carried by children's hands. The heat softened the ground under our soles, boards popped like knuckles. A mercenary glanced at us and then away, too many faces in the smoke, too many eyes for certainty. The masked director lifted his hand. 3 other masked men shouldered a crate painted with the sunburst emblem and walked it to the fire. Cameras pivoted. The crowd cried out. Hold, and breathed. Look. On the side of the crate, under the emblem's paint, you could see the ghost of older stencils, letters scraped but not vanished, school and relief, not for resale. The director turned his wrist to angle the crate so the cameras caught only the emblem. Then he nodded for the toss. Carla's drone dove, frame tight as a scalpel. The stream caught the crate before it kissed flame, caught the scraped words, the emblem, the angle of concealment, the choreography. And caught the director's uncovered wrist, where a thin tattoo peeked above the glove, a rook with its head filed flat. I felt my own rook bite my palm. Cold through heat. The same symbol but not ours. Counterfeit, Carla whispered. He wears our piece like a brand. Or a theft, and said. He thinks we own only straight lines. He underestimates what happens when you break one and call it truth. Mercer, a voice barked. A visor swung toward me. The camera it carried jerked for a fraction, then steadied. You came to watch your work? I came to watch yours, I said. No cut will hide your angles. The visor tilted, not sure if it had heard defiance or prayer. The mercenary lifted his baton, and then a grandmother pressed between us, her wooden spoon still wet from slapping water at flames. You'll have to break me first, she said to the baton, not looking up. I've been broken by better men. The baton did not fall. Cameras do not love grandmothers unless they bow or bleed, and this one did neither. She simply spooned water onto a fire that would never taste it. The director signaled for another crate. Anne's hand found mine, an anchor reverse of the ledger's drag. If you can't stop a burning, outlast the broadcast, she murmured. Make it artless. Make it boring. Make them keep cutting until the cut admits it's a lie. Carla, I said, show the parts they won't use. For 1 hour, then 2, then a third, we filmed nothing but hands. Rope-burned hands passing buckets. Children's hands red from heat. Masked hands turning crates so the camera saw only emblems. A mercenary's gloved hand hesitating over a loaf, then slipping it to a child when no lens watched. We filmed the director glancing always left before every choreographed toss, as if waiting for the invisible cue of a voice that never wanted to appear on screen. We filmed the scraped stencils. We filmed the tattoo, Rook shaved flat, meaning the piece had been reshaped to parrot a king. When the fire ate itself to coals, the crews packed with efficient, unhurried motions. The screens trumpeted, stability cleanses. The crowd sagged into ash-colored quiet. Only then did the director remove his paper mask, wipe his mouth with the back of his wrist, and pocket a sunburst pin. His face was younger than his posture. His eyes were too old for either. Come morning, he told a subordinate, we do the North Market. Remember angles. And tell props department the relief, not for resale, stencils are bleeding through. Someone needs to sand deeper. He did not expect a reply. Men who build images don't imagine being watched from the angles they ignore. Anne's mouth twitched toward something not quite smile. You wanted truth you could carry, she said. Put that in your pocket. I didn't reach for the ledger. I reached for the rook and pressed it into the soot, then lifted it. The imprint it left on my palm was a straight line blurred by ash. Carla, I said, cut nothing. Collage everything. Give the city tedium so honest it's a wound. Already building it, she said. No music. No narration. Just time. Let them feel how long a loaf burns when your stomach watches it. On our way back through the tunnels, we passed a boy curled against the concrete, a loaf clutched whole in his sleep like a talisman he feared would vanish if he bit it, and draped her coat over him. The gesture looked almost like surrender. "Compassion's a camera too," she said when I looked at her. "It films the self. But some pictures make you the person you can stand to be." At the parish, Naya waited in the doorway, Ash dusting her hair white as winter. "How bad?" she asked. "Worse than a burn," I said. "A performance." She touched the ledger with the back of her fingers as if not to smudge it. "Then show them practice. People forgive fire. They don't forgive rehearsal." I opened the book. Not to write names. To press the rook again, leaving soot in the groove. A straight mark, imperfect, human. The page looked bruised. Outside, smoke kept the sky low. Somewhere, water found a way to reflect flame without catching. The city learned a new sound, the hush that follows a broadcast when the room understands it has been made into an audience. "Tomorrow," Carla said, eyes fever bright over a face gray with ash, "we let them watch themselves watching." "And if he burns every market?" Naya asked. "Then the last thing he burns," and answered, "won't be bread." We did not ask what she meant. The night had already taught us how to hear meanings without words. The parish had no bell. Our throats had learned the note. And over the coal-black horizon, the smoke wrote its shabby sentence. That memory is not what survives the fire, it is what refuses to look away while it burns. By dawn, Cole's broadcast had already spun the fire into scripture. Screens in every quarter replayed the montage. Crates engulfed in flame, families weeping, soldiers standing calm. Caption: Mercer's chaos starves you. Stability provides. The irony curdled in every throat that had smelled the smoke. Carla threw her scorched transmitter onto the nave floor. We gave them raw footage, hours of his stagecraft, the stencils, the tattoo. But half the city only sees his loop. The edits we bleed. That's the exchange. Naya's face was carved in stone. Then we give them a loop of our own. Pound it so deep they can't unhear it. And stood apart, her voice even. Noise is easy. Memory is harder. What you showed yesterday was process. If we keep showing process, one day even silence will look like performance. I opened the ledger on the altar, soot still smudged across the last page. The rook pressed into my palm, its edge blackened. Then we don't shout louder. We make them hear themselves. That afternoon, Carla's cut went live. Not a sermon. Not even narration. Just hours of footage. Masked men angling crates, sanding stencils, the young director rubbing his rook-tattooed wrist, the loaf burning while a child's eyes watched. At first the city scoffed. Boring, some muttered. Static. Cole's silver bell tolled pure above the feed. But boredom is its own weapon. By the second hour people whispered, "Why so much sanding? Why the angles? Why hide words?" By the fourth hour, families were huddled around cracked screens, muttering, "If it's all Mercer's chaos, why do they rehearse it so well?" Cole responded swiftly. His face appeared mid-broadcast, interrupting the footage. Calm, paternal. "These images are staged. Actors in masks. Mercer fabricates chaos to confuse you. But he had to cut the stream to do it, and that was the fracture." Carla smirked, voice hoarse. "He admitted it exists. You can't denounce a ghost without giving it shape." That night, deserters returned with more whispers. Markets in the East Quarter won't open. Families say they don't trust crates anymore. They don't know if it's food or performance. Fear of fire had become fear of bread. Anne's eyes glinted in the candlelight. He has burned his own trust. He thinks he destroyed chaos, but he only made himself arsonist of memory. Naya snarled, pacing. Good. Let the city starve on suspicion until they spit his loaves back at him. But I felt the ledger's weight pressing harder. Starvation isn't strategy, it's graves. And graves always demand ink. 2 nights later, Cole tried to reclaim the stage. He gathered families into the civic square under floodlights, broadcasting live. Rows of soldiers handed out loaves from pristine crates stamped with the sunburst. Cameras lingered on grateful hands, on children biting bread. "Stability feeds," his voice crooned. "Mercer only takes." But halfway through the ceremony, a murmur rippled. A mother tore open her loaf, and found it hollow. Inside, charred crumbs rattled in a blackened shell. Another loaf cracked apart in a child's hands, ash spilling like sand. Gasps turned into screams. Families dropped bread as if it were coals. The feed caught it all. Carla's drone high above, Cole's own cameras unable to look away fast enough. Anne's whisper carried in the nave as we watched. He wanted theater. He got tragedy. The next day the ash markets burned again, not by Cole's order but by the people themselves. Families dragged crates into the street, smashing them open to prove what lay inside. Some still carried food. Others only ash. The city howled. Not against us. Against him. That evening I opened the ledger. I wrote not names but objects. Loaf. Crate. Each word a notch, a memory that couldn't be spun. Carla leaned over, sweat streaking her soot-stained face. You're writing bread. Bread is life, I said. Bread burned is betrayal. Both must be remembered. Naya barked a laugh. Careful, Mercer. Soon you'll run out of pages. Anne's eyes lingered on me, sharp and unreadable. Or you'll run out of fire before you run out of ink. That night, the bell was gone, the markets blackened, the ledger heavy. But the city hummed. Not with chants, not with hymns. With something harder to silence, suspicion. And suspicion, once lit, does not extinguish. The smoke from the markets hadn't settled before Cole staged his counterstrike. Not fire this time. Not bread. This time, theater of law. Screens lit across the city, showing a long hall draped in red banners, a stage disguised as a courtroom. At its center, families knelt in chains, dockworkers, vendors, a grandmother whose hands still smelled of salt and wheat. A polished gavel struck wood. Order, barked the judge, his robe too new, his voice too even. Cole's face appeared high above, serene as ever. Chaos, he told the city, does not only burn your bread. It burns your souls. Today those who confessed will show you the truth. Mercer's insurgents bribed them to torch the markets. They did not burn for hunger. They burned for him. Gasps rippled through the parish. Naya's knuckles whitened on her crutch. He's turning victims into arsonists. Carla muttered, stagecraft. Look at the angles, the banners hide half the hall. Look at the gavel, it's steel not wood. This isn't trial. It's broadcast. Anne's eyes narrowed. Confession theater. He doesn't care if the city believes the words. He only cares that they watch. One by one the chain rose. The grandmother spoke first, voice trembling. I burned the crates. Mercer gave me fire. He said if the bread was gone, the people would follow him. Her eyes flicked once toward the lens, hollow. The judge nodded gravely. And so you admit guilt? I admit, she whispered. I burned. The crowd outside screens groaned, some shouting at images that could not hear them. Dockworkers followed. A vendor next. Each confession a script. Mercer ordered, Mercer bribed, Mercer promised. Each word tightened chains around our parish, each voice stolen, bent to Cole's script. Carla slammed her fist into the altar. They're reading lines. He's handing out a playbill and calling it justice. And leaned closer, whispering like a blade. Lines don't matter. The pauses do. Watch their pauses. We leaned in. The vendor hesitated before every phrase as if waiting for a prompt. The dockworker's lips moved out of sync, rehearsed. The grandmother's eyes darted always left, toward someone unseen off camera. And then we saw it, the director. The same young man from the fire, Rook tattoo shaved flat on his wrist. Standing just out of frame, lips moving like a prompter. Carla gasped. It's him. He staged the markets. Now he scripts the trial. Naya snarled, then we expose him. Show the feed. But Carla's voice cracked. He's learned. The cameras are boxed. Every angle locked. My drones can't pierce the hall. Anne's smile was thin. Then don't pierce it. Corrupt it. Give them too much truth until the lie drowns. That night, Carla worked feverishly, patching fragments from intercepted comms, old footage of the director at the markets, the Rook tattoo flashing, the crates angled. She stitched it against the trial, splicing hesitation beside command, confession beside coaching. By dawn the cut was ready. We don't call it fake, she said, eyes bloodshot. We call it rehearsal. And we let the city see the dress rehearsal behind his premiere. The cut went live as the trial reached sentencing. On Cole's screens, dockworkers bowing their heads, the judge declaring death for arson. On Carla's drones, the same dockworkers days earlier, chained and bruised before cameras rolled, the director whispering lines, the Rook tattoo flashing. 2 feeds. 2 truths. 1 city forced to choose. Crowds erupted. Some wept at the confessions, swearing I had betrayed them. Others shouted at the splice, pointing to the tattoo, the whispers, the unnatural pauses. Markets that had been ash now filled with noise. Families arguing, fists raised not at us but at each other. Cole's silver bell tolled perfect overhead, trying to calm. But the city had learned to distrust perfection. Back in the parish, chaos rippled. Families screamed at me, demanding proof the ledger wasn't orchestrating the fire. Others begged me to write the dockworkers' names before Cole's executioners erased them. The ledger lay open, blank page waiting. And leaned close, voice cold. If you don't write them, they vanish into his theater. If you do, half the city will say you damned them yourself. I gripped the rook until blood welled in my palm. Straight lines. No curves. Then I wrote. Not dockworker or vendor. Not guilt. Not innocence. I wrote stage. Prop. Line. Director. When I finished, I slammed the ledger shut. This book doesn't decide who burned, I said to the parish. It decides what cannot be hidden. Bread turned to ash. Lives turned to props. Truth turned to theater. That is what I write. Naya's voice thundered through the nave. Then let him put us on trial. We'll show him how chaos confesses. Carla wept with exhaustion but laughed, wiping ash from her face. And we'll cut his lines faster than he can feed them. Anne's eyes glimmered in the candlelight. Careful, Jonah. Theater cuts both ways. Once you step on stage, the city never forgets your lines. That night, the bell was gone, the market's ash, the ledger heavier. But the city now carried 2 scripts. And scripts, once memorized, are harder to erase than even names. The trial ended, but Cole wasn't finished. He had staged confessions, fed the city lines, wrapped theater in banners. Now he would seal it with blood. 2 days later, every screen lit at once. Soldiers marched chained figures onto a scaffold in the civic square, the grandmother, the dockworkers, the vendor. Their heads hung low, their wrists bound. Cole's voice carried like scripture. Justice is mercy. Stability is survival. But chaos demands payment. The camera panned wide, showing a sea of onlookers. Families pressed shoulder to shoulder, eyes wide, bowls clutched like talismans. A polished blade gleamed under the floodlights. Carla's voice cracked in my ear, whispering from the parish. He's going to kill them live. Edit nothing. Broadcast everything. Make their deaths my guilt. Naya's hand shook on her crutch, fury burning through her bandages. Then we break the feed. Cut his rope before he cuts their throats. And stood still as stone. No. If you break his feed, he claims mercy. If you let it run, he claims justice. The only way through is to let his perfection fracture itself. The executioner raised his blade. The camera swept close on the grandmother's face. She didn't cry. Didn't beg. She lifted her head and looked directly into the lens. And she spoke. Not the script Cole had written. Not the lines whispered by the director. Her voice shook but carried, I burned nothing. I confessed nothing. I was told to speak lies. If I must die, let it be with my own words. Gasps tore through the square. The crowd surged forward, voices breaking into chaos. Cole's voice snapped sharp, brittle under calm. Cut the audio. But Carla was already there. Her drone buzzed above, hijacking frequencies, keeping the sound alive. The city heard it all. The grandmother's words spread faster than fire. Families screamed, some collapsing to their knees, others throwing bowls at the scaffold. Soldiers hesitated, visors trembling. Cole appeared live on screen, face pale but voice still iron. This woman is chaos itself. Silence her. The blade came down. The crowd roared, not for Cole, not for mercy. For truth. Carla's feed didn't cut away. It held on the scaffold, on the body crumpling, on the crowd shoving against barricades. On soldiers lowering their weapons rather than fire into grieving families. Then came the fracture. One of the dockworkers stumbled forward before the next blade could rise. He tore free of his guard, chest heaving, and screamed into the lens. We burned nothing. We were props. We were told. The blade struck him mid-sentence. But the scream stayed. Carla froze the frame, looping his last words. We were props. Every screen across the city repeated it. We were props. We were props. We were props. Cole's calm voice tried to override, but it was drowned beneath his own execution. By dusk, the scaffold was drenched, but the city was ablaze, not with fire but with rage. Families overturned crates stamped with sunbursts. Bowls clanged like weapons. Bells that had survived in schools and towers tolled in jagged rhythm, imitating the cracked bronze that no longer stood. Cole had meant to seal memory with spectacle. Instead, he had carved his own betrayal into the city's eyes. In the parish, silence hung heavy. Families wept. Deserters sharpened knives with trembling hands. Naya slammed her crutch to the floor. They died speaking truth. Write them, Jonah. Ink their words before Cole buries them again. Carla's hand shook over her rig. The feed's already spreading. I can't stop it, but I can make sure it never dies. Anne's voice was softer than I had ever heard. Props become martyrs when they speak one unscripted line. Cole forgot the one rule of theater: never give the stage to those you cannot control. I opened the ledger. The blank page glared, waiting. I wrote not just their names. I wrote their words. I burned nothing. We were props. Each phrase etched deep, black ink cutting through soot stains. When I closed the book, the Rook pressed hard against the cover, heavier than before. Straight lines. No curves. But now the lines carried not just memory. They carried rebellion. That night, the parish bells were gone, the market's ash, the ledger heavier. But the city had heard the fracture. Not from bronze. Not from bowls. Not even from me. From the last voices of those Cole had tried to turn into props. And once a city hears the unscripted, it cannot go back to silence. The scaffold had burned itself into the city's eyes. Every alley whispered the grandmother's last words, every rooftop repeated the dockworker's scream: we were props. Cole's silver bell tolled over and over, desperate to smother the memory. But each note rang thinner, like glass ready to crack. And then the whispers began about him. The young man with the Rook tattoo. The one who staged the fires. The one who fed lines into the trial. The one who lived in both shadows and screens. The city didn't know his name. They only called him the Rook's shadow. We heard it first from a deserter, eyes bloodshot from smoke. They say he isn't just Cole's director. They say he writes the scripts, chooses who lives, who dies. They say even Cole fears him. Carla slammed her palms on the altar. That tattoo wasn't random. He marked himself with our piece, shaved it flat like he was mocking us. Naya gritted her teeth. Then let's carve the mockery off his wrist. Anne's voice, low and steady, cut the air. He is not mocking you. He is replacing you. Jonah keeps a ledger of memory. The shadow keeps a ledger of lies. 2 books, same symbol. If he lives, the city will not know which ledger is truth. I stared at the Rook in my hand. Its edges pressed deeper than bone. Straight lines, no curves. And yet his mark bent those lines into theater. Word reached us through Carla's hacked comms. The shadow was preparing a new broadcast. A play bigger than trials, louder than fires. Something meant to bury the scaffold screams under fresh spectacle. We find him before it airs, Carla hissed, soldering wires onto her drone. We cut the script before it hits the stage. Naya grinned, the hunger for a fight blazing in her eyes. Finally. A name to break. And tilted her head, gray coat catching candlelight. Break him too fast and he becomes martyr. Break him too late and he becomes legend. Timing is the only weapon here. That night, we tracked smoke and whispers into the industrial quarter. Warehouses gutted by fire stood like ribs of a dead animal. And in one lit by floodlights we found it, a stage under construction. Rows of chairs. Painted backdrops of markets, scaffold, bell. Cameras perched like vultures. And at the center the shadow himself, sleeves rolled, Rook tattoo bare. He adjusted lights with the precision of a surgeon, directed masked men with clipped commands, rehearsed lines in a voice that made silence obey. It was theater before an audience arrived. We crept closer. Carla's drone buzzed above, lens fixed. Naya's crutch clicked on stone, her breath heavy with violence. And slipped like smoke, hand brushing the dagger she never admitted carrying. I clutched the ledger, heart hammering. The shadow turned before we were near. Not startled. Expecting. His eyes locked on me. Not fear. Recognition. You brought the Rook, he said simply. His voice was smooth, younger than it should have been. Good. One ledger meets another. Naya lunged first, fury breaking silence. Her crutch swung, smashing through a chair. You killed them. You burned their bread, fed them lines, slit their throats on camera. The shadow didn't flinch. They volunteered. Not for me. For memory. Do you think they screamed by accident? Carla shouted, you made them scream. I gave them stage, he said, calm as stone. Cole gave them death. And Jonah here, his gaze cut into me, gave them permanence. Together we made truth. His words slithered into the cracks. And stiffened, eyes narrowing. I forced breath through clenched teeth. Truth isn't theater. Truth isn't props. The shadow smiled faintly. All memory is theater, Mercer. You write names in ink. I write names in fire and blood. Which does the city remember louder? Carla hissed, Jonah, he's baiting you? But my hands had already opened the ledger. Pages fluttered, soot-stained, heavy with names and words. The shadow stepped closer, his tattooed wrist gleaming. You keep your book because you fear forgetting. I keep mine because I fear silence. Tell me, Jonah, What's the difference? The bell's phantom toll echoed in my chest. Straight lines. No curves. But I felt the line bend. Anne's voice broke the tension, cold as steel. You claim to serve memory, but you serve only spectacle. Props rot. Scripts fade. Ledger endures. The shadow's eyes glinted. Ledger endures? Or ledger consumes? How long before Jonah writes all of you into his death list, same as Cole claimed? Nia snarled. Enough. She raised her crutch. But the shadow didn't retreat. He opened his arms, daring. Strike me. Make me martyr. The city already chants my name. Do you know what they call me? Not traitor. Not liar. Shadow. Shadows survive every flame. Carla's drone hovered, recording everything. The shadow smiled at the lens. And tomorrow they will see this footage too. Jonah Mercer, confronted by the shadow. Which Rook do they follow, the one who remembers or the one who scripts? The air cracked with choice. I clutched the Rook, my palm bleeding. I could strike. I could write. I could walk away. Anne's eyes locked on mine, silent command clear. Choose the line before he writes it for you. The shadow waited, patient, arms open. The city would hear whichever choice I made. The warehouse reeked of oil, sweat, and rehearsed silence. Floodlights pooled white across plywood stages, half-painted backdrops of markets and bells. Cameras blinked like waiting eyes. The shadow stood at the center, Rook tattoo bare, arms outstretched as if he were inviting crucifixion. His voice carried like theater, even in an empty hall. Choose Mercer. Ledger or stage? Ink or fire? Which Rook rules the board? Nia tightened her grip on the crutch, lips curled in a snarl. We end this now. She took one heavy step forward. Carla hissed, wait, he wants the blow on camera. He's already written the script. Anne's eyes never left the shadow. Then Jonah must write a different ending. Her words cut into me. The ledger in my hands throbbed with weight, pages heavy with names and screams. The Rook pressed so hard into my palm it left crescents of blood. Straight lines, no curves. But the shadow had bent those lines until they curved back at me. I stepped closer. My voice came raw, torn from too many nights of ash and bells. You think names and scripts are the same? You think memory is theater? The shadow's smile was faint, deliberate. Of course. A name written in ink is only a script waiting for its actor. A name shouted on scaffold is a performance the city never forgets. He leaned in, whisper soft but carried by microphones hidden in the rafters. The difference between us, Jonah, is that I embrace the stage. You hide behind a book and pretend it isn't a play. The cameras turned, hungry. Nia lunged again, fury boiling. I'll smash your skull until no stage remembers you. And caught her arm, iron in her grip. If you kill him, you play his part. If you spare him, he writes the next act. Carla's drone buzzed above, recording everything. Jonah, whatever you do, they'll see it. He's forcing the city to choose between Rook and Rook. The shadow spread his hands wider, every gesture choreographed. Exactly. One Rook remembers. One Rook commands. But both Rooks move straight. Which line will the city follow? I opened the ledger. The blank page glared like a spotlight. My hand shook over it, pen trembling. What happens, I asked, if I write you? The shadow's eyes gleamed. Then I live forever. Your ink makes me immortal. Every name you write feeds me. Carla whispered through clenched teeth, don't give him the honor. But Anne's gaze sharpened. Sometimes ink is blade. Sometimes immortality is prison. The Rook in my hand cut deeper. I moved the pen. Slowly. Deliberately. On the page I wrote not his name, because the city didn't know it. I wrote his mask. The Rook's shadow. Ink bled dark, deep into the page. The shadow's smile faltered just slightly. You think ink binds me? You think a word on paper is stronger than a camera? I held the ledger high. My voice broke but carried. You call yourself Shadow. Then you are Shadow. Nothing more. Not director. Not king. Just absence of light. Carla swung her drone feed across the ink, projecting it onto the backdrop behind him. The words glowing large, unmistakable, the Rook's shadow. The crowd outside screens gasped. For the first time, the city saw him not as mystery, not as prophet. Just as shadow. He stepped back. The Rook tattoo on his wrist looked suddenly small under the giant letters glowing above him. You can't erase me, he spat, fury cracking the theater calm. I made your martyrs. I fed them lines that shook your city. Anne's voice slid like a blade. And now the city sees who fed them. Not martyr. Not prophet. Prompter. The word cut sharper than any crutch. Naya barked a laugh, teeth bared. You wanted a stage? You just got cast as extra. The Shadow's face twisted, calm broken. He lunged, reaching for the ledger. Give me the book. I slammed it shut. The Rook dented the cover. No, I said. You already live in its margins. That's where shadows belong. The cameras caught it all. The Shadow clawing for the book, the city watching him reduced from playwright to silhouette. His movements looked less like command and more like flailing. Carla cut the feed wide, showing the whole stage, cheap props, half-painted sets, masked assistants frozen mid-cue. The illusion collapsed in a single frame. And across the city voices rose, not in doubt but in laughter. Bitter, defiant, cracked like the bell that no longer hung. The Shadow stumbled back into his own lights, sweat streaking his face. This isn't over, he hissed. You think a word can kill me? I am the word. And stepped forward, her eyes iron. Then die as one. She pulled the rope on a floodlight, swinging it down. The bulb shattered, sparks cascading. Smoke swallowed the stage. When it cleared, the Shadow was gone. Silence hung in the warehouse. Naya's breath came ragged, fury unsated. He slipped away. Like smoke. Like shadow. Carla landed her drone, shaking. But the city saw. They saw him desperate. They saw him for what he is. Anne's face stayed unreadable. A shadow never dies. It lingers where memory fails. But now the people know his name, and names hold shadows still. That night, back in the parish, I opened the ledger once more. On the page, beneath the words the Rook's shadow, I drew the Rook itself, straight lines, no curves. But this time I filled it with black until it was nothing but silhouette. When I closed the book, the Rook in my palm felt lighter. Straight lines. Still unbroken. And now the chapter closed. The warehouse was smoke and silence. The Shadow had vanished into rafters and darkness, leaving only broken props and the echo of laughter from the streets outside. For the first time since the siege began, the city laughed, not with joy but with recognition. Laughter that said, "We see your theater. We see the strings." We limped back through the tunnels, ash still clinging to our clothes. Naya's crutch clicked on stone like a metronome of fury. Carla carried her drone against her chest as if it were a child. And walked ahead, coat dragging, her silence a blade we all felt at our backs. When we reached the parish, families rose to meet us. Their eyes were tired, their bowls still empty, but they were lit by something different. Not hope. Not yet. Something sharper. Was it him? A boy asked, gripping the hem of my coat. The one who made them say lies? Yes, I said, voice rough. It was him. The boy nodded slowly. Then he's smaller than the fire. That night, the nave glowed with candles. Families pressed close, deserters leaned against pillars, and the ledger lay open on the altar. Carla replayed the footage. The city watched again as the Shadow clawed for the book, sweat streaking, props falling. They laughed again, softer this time but louder than the silver bell that tolled in vain outside. Naya bared her teeth. We cut him down to size. Let Cole watch his director crawl. And shook her head. Shadows don't die. They retreat. And when they return, they do so sharper. Her words chilled the room. But no one looked away. Later I sat alone with the ledger. The words the Rook's shadow bled dark on the page, black Rook inked solid beside it. The Rook in my hand felt lighter, yes, but also lonelier. Straight lines. No curves. But even straight lines cast shadows. Anne's voice came from the dark pews. You bound him. But binding is not banishing. I looked up. You think he'll return? She stepped into the candlelight, her palms still raw from ropes. He's already returned. Every whisper of doubt, every laugh that turns to fear when silence falls, that's him. He thrives where memory fractures. Then what do we do? I asked. She tilted her head. The same thing you've always done. Right. Bring. Refuse silence. But know this, Jonah, when you named him you gave him weight. A name lives longer than a face. Her eyes glinted. Be ready when the Shadow claims his next stage. Outside the city was restless. Families banged bowls against stone, a rhythm cracked but unbroken. Children played games where they shouted lines from the scaffold, mocking the scripts they'd been forced to watch. Cole's broadcasts blared louder, flooding streets with sermons of stability. But the laughter cut through, jagged as our lost bell. For once his voice sounded smaller. At dawn, deserters returned from scouting. Their faces were ash gray. They're moving troops, one reported. Cole's tightening his grip. He lost the Shadow stage but he'll answer with steel. Another spat blood into the dirt. He won't fight theater with theater anymore. He'll fight it with fire and rifles. The parish fell silent. I touched the ledger's spine. Then let him. We'll meet fire with memory. Naya raised her crutch, fierce and trembling. And rifles with straight lines. Carla's voice cracked with exhaustion. And cameras with cameras. No cut he makes will hide the cuts we've already shown. Anne's eyes lingered on me, unreadable. And shadows with light. If you can keep the candles lit. That evening I rang what was left of the bell, a fragment salvaged from rubble, struck with a spoon. The note was thin, almost pathetic. But the city answered. Pots clanged, bowls banged, voices rose. Not in unison. Not perfect, but alive. Cole's silver bell tolled in response. Flawless. Cold. Empty. For the first time it sounded lonely. I opened the ledger one final time that night. Families pressed close, waiting. I didn't write names. I didn't write places. I wrote a line. The bell cracked. The markets burned. The shadow fled. But the city laughed. Ink bled like blood into the page. When I closed the book I felt the rook in my hand lighter still. Straight lines, no curves. But this time the line carried laughter, fractured and defiant. So ended chapter 2 of the siege. Not with victory. Not with peace. But with a laugh that turned silence into memory. And somewhere beyond the smoke, I knew the shadow was already writing his next act.